Most people today can spend an entire night alone in a locked room and never seriously wonder whether they will still be alive by morning. Yet for almost all of human history, that confidence may have been impossible. Long before walls, electric lights, or permanent villages, night transformed the world into something different. Familiar paths disappeared. Sounds travelled farther than sight. A single person lying alone in the darkness was not simply resting. They were separating themselves from the very thing that had helped humans survive for hundreds of thousands of years: other humans. What is strange is that traces of that ancient fear may still linger inside us, in the uneasy feeling of an empty house, in the instinct to listen for footsteps at night, and in the quiet comfort of knowing someone else is sleeping nearby, even when no danger seems to exist. If being alone is often safest in the modern world, why did ancient humans fear sleeping alone at night? Night was never only the absence of daylight. For ancient humans, night was a change in the rules of the world. The same ground that looked ordinary in the afternoon could become uncertain after sunset. A path between trees could disappear into shadow. A stone, a root, a hollow in the soil, or the edge of a stream could no longer be judged easily by the eye. Shapes that were harmless in daylight could become unclear. Sounds that had been buried beneath movement, speech, wind, and work could begin to rise out of the dark. This is one reason sleeping alone at night would not have felt like a small private choice in the deep human past. It meant placing a breathing body into an environment where sight had weakened, distance had become harder to measure, and every unknown sound could carry more weight than it did during the day. The fear was not simply imagination. It came from a real change in the world around the human body. To understand that fear, it helps to imagine life before fixed houses, before doors, before lamps, and before the habit of trusting walls. Many ancient human groups lived in open landscapes, temporary camps, shelters made from branches, hide, grass, or bone, rock overhangs, cave mouths, river edges, woodlands, grasslands, and cold exposed places where safety depended less on a building and more on awareness. The night did not arrive as a quiet curtain. It arrived as a loss. The loss of clear vision, the loss of easy movement, the loss of knowing exactly what was nearby. For an animal like a human, not especially fast, not armed with claws, not protected by thick fur, this mattered deeply. A person alone in the dark had fewer ways to correct a mistake. A wrong step, a missed sound, a fading fire, or a delayed reaction could carry a higher cost than it would in daylight. Ancient humans were not helpless. They had tools, fire, memory, cooperation, and knowledge of their surroundings. But those strengths worked best when they were shared. One person could remember a path, but several people could watch more directions. One person could hear a sound, but a group could compare it with other sounds. One person might wake suddenly and be confused, while others nearby might already understand what had changed. This is where the fear of sleeping alone begins to make sense. It was not only fear of predators, it was fear of losing the living network that made a vulnerable body stronger than it appeared. Human survival began, again and again, with bodies close enough to notice one another. The ancient night also belonged to other animals. Many creatures moved more easily after the sun was gone. Some hunted by smell, some followed sound. Some could see better in low light than humans could. Even when large predators were not present, other dangers remained. Biting insects, snakes in some places, cold air, unstable ground, strangers from another group, or the simple danger of waking disoriented and alone. Archaeology cannot preserve every moment of fear beside an ancient fire. It cannot show us every sound heard in the darkness. But it does show that humans repeatedly gathered around hearths, used shelters, returned to protected places, and lived in social groups across very long stretches of time. These patterns suggest that safety was rarely a purely individual condition. For most of our evolutionary history, the night had no switch that could make it harmless. There was no light beside the sleeping place, no glass window, no locked metal door, no phone within reach, and no distant system of help waiting outside. The edge between human space and wild space was thinner. A camp might be warmer and safer than the open dark, but it was still part of the same landscape. The sounds beyond the fire were not background noise. They were information. A branch breaking, a low call, a sudden silence among insects, or movement in dry grass could become meaningful. In that world, sleeping alone meant carrying all interpretation by yourself at the exact moment when the sleeping brain was least prepared to do so. This may be why the modern image of a person sleeping alone in a quiet room can hide a much older story. Today, solitude can mean comfort, privacy, and rest. But in the long beginning of human life, solitude at night could mean exposure. It could mean that no one heard what you failed to hear. No one noticed the fire fading. No one felt you shiver. No one woke when your breathing changed. The fear of the dark was not only fear of darkness itself. It was fear of being separated from the group when darkness made the world harder to read. The ancient night was not the same everywhere, but it always reduced the human body in a similar way. In a forest, darkness could thicken between trunks until distance became difficult to judge. In open grassland, the horizon might remain wide, yet the body still lost detail close to the ground. Near a river, water could hide the sound of movement. In colder places, wind could cover small warnings. In warmer places, insects, animals, and night birds could fill the air until one sound was hard to separate from another. The exact landscape changed, but the human problem remained steady. A person lying alone had to trust senses that were no longer working at their strongest. Daylight gives humans an advantage because we are visual animals. We read faces, tracks, gestures, paths, tools, weather, and danger through the eyes. At night, that advantage shrinks. The body does not become blind, but it becomes less certain. It has to guess more. It has to wait longer. It has to listen for meaning in sounds that may be harmless, or may not be harmless at all. This uncertainty is important because ancient fear was often not a clear picture of danger. It was a space where the body could not confirm safety. For early humans, not knowing could be dangerous enough. A sleeping place was never only a place to rest. It was a decision about where the body would be weakest for many hours. If someone lay down alone beyond the fire, beyond the usual circle of people, or too far from the voices and breathing of others, that person was not only farther from comfort, they were farther from shared information. A group could turn darkness into something slightly more readable. One person might know the sound of a certain animal. Another might remember where dry branches had fallen earlier. Someone else might wake because of a child moving, a dog-like animal calling in the distance, or a shift in the wind. No single person had to carry the whole night alone. This is one of the oldest human protections. Not a wall, not a weapon, but divided attention. Even when most people slept, the presence of others changed the meaning of sleep. A body beside another body was easier to notice. A cough, a sudden movement, a gasp, a shiver, or the absence of normal breathing could become part of the group's awareness. Alone, those signals ended inside the body that needed help. Near others, they could travel outward. This does not mean ancient people lived in constant terror. That would be too simple, and probably untrue. People in the deep past knew their environments with a closeness that most modern people no longer experience. They understood seasonal sounds, animal paths, safe places, dangerous slopes, the behavior of fire, and the habits of those around them. But knowledge did not remove the basic fact that night limited the human body. Familiarity made the dark more understandable, not harmless. The people who survived were not necessarily the people who feared everything. They were the people whose caution fit the world they lived in. Sleeping alone at night may have felt wrong because it removed the body from the very pattern that made caution useful. There was no one to compare fear with, no one to say the sound was ordinary, no one to rise first if it was not. The darkness also changed time. During the day, movement can be immediate. A person can see, choose, walk, gather, call, and correct direction. At night, time becomes slower and more uncertain. A small sound may require waiting. A shadow may require listening. A fading ember may require someone to wake enough to feed it. For ancient humans, this slow uncertainty sat directly beside sleep. The body needed rest, but the environment did not stop moving. The group helped solve that contradiction. It allowed sleep to exist inside a larger field of awareness. This is why sleeping alone was not just a matter of bravery. It was a matter of structure. A lone sleeper had no surrounding system, no shared ears, no shared memory, no nearby body to warm or wake. The ancient night was a place where the world became harder to read, and humans had learned, over a very long time, that the safest way to read it was together. The strongest fear in the ancient night may not have been the sight of danger, because danger was often not visible at all. It may have been the feeling that the world had become unreadable. A human lying alone could not easily know whether a sound was near or far, whether movement came from wind or from an animal, whether a sudden silence meant nothing or meant that other creatures had noticed something first. This kind of uncertainty is slower than panic. It does not strike all at once. It settles around the body. It asks the mind to keep checking, even when the body wants sleep. For ancient humans, this mattered because sleep required a surrender that the night did not always seem to allow. The eyes had to close while the ears remained half awake. The muscles had to soften while the ground still held roots, stones, cold, insects, and unseen movement. The breath had to become quiet while the world outside the sleeping place continued to breathe in its own way. Alone, a person had to lie inside that uncertainty without the correction of another human presence. Near others, the same night could feel different, not because it became safe in any complete sense, but because it became shared. A sound heard by several people was no longer trapped inside one frightened mind. A movement near the edge of camp could be judged by more than one memory. A sleeping body could be protected by the simple fact that it was not the only body there. This is an old human pattern. From what is known about hunter-gatherer life, human survival was deeply social. Food, childcare, protection, knowledge, and movement through the landscape were often organized through relationships rather than through isolated individuals. It is reasonable to think that sleep belonged to this same social world. A sleeping place was not only a patch of ground, it was part of a group arrangement, shaped by fire, kinship, habit, weather, age, and trust. People did not need to explain this with the language of evolution. They would have felt it through experience. A night spent too far from others would be colder, quieter in the wrong way, and harder to interpret. The human body could learn that difference long before anyone could describe it. In the deep beginning of human life, the group did something that no single person could do alone. It stretched the senses beyond the skin. The eyes of the group could cover more directions. The ears of the group could notice more changes. The memories of the group could hold more details about animal paths, dangerous ground, strangers, storms, and previous nights in the same place. Even the smallest sounds of the group mattered. Breathing, shifting, murmuring, children turning in sleep, someone tending embers, someone waking briefly and lying down again. These sounds could become a kind of proof that the human world was still close. They told the body that it had not been left outside the circle. This is why loneliness at night can feel different from loneliness during the day. Daytime solitude may still allow movement, vision, work, and choice. Nighttime solitude removes many of those tools. It places the body in stillness while asking the mind to remain aware. For ancient humans, that stillness could become dangerous if it happened too far from the group. A person alone had to defend not only against real threats but against the cost of uncertainty itself. Too much uncertainty keeps sleep shallow. Too little sleep weakens judgment, movement, warmth, memory, and patience the next day. So the fear of sleeping alone was not only about surviving one night, it was connected to the long rhythm of survival across many nights. A group that slept with some sense of shared protection could recover better. Children could rest more safely. Elders could remain within reach. Adults could divide attention without saying so. The next morning, the group could move, gather, hunt, care, remember, and decide again. This is where the ancient night becomes more than a scene of darkness. It becomes one of the quiet pressures that shaped human social life. The human fear of sleeping alone was not simply a weakness to overcome. It was a signal from a species whose safety had often depended on being near enough to hear, warm, warn, and wake one another. Before houses carried the night for us, people carried the night together. A sleeping human is a strange animal. During the day, the body can look alert, upright, and capable. It can scan the ground, lift tools, follow tracks, carry children, gather wood, read faces, and move away from danger. But sleep changes almost everything that makes a human able to protect itself. The eyes close, the neck relaxes, the hands stop holding, the feet no longer choose direction, the muscles soften, the mind loosens its grip on the outside world. A person who could walk for many hours, remember a landscape, shape stone, carry fire, and speak with others becomes still, quiet, and slow to answer. For ancient humans, this change was not a small biological detail. It was one of the deepest risks of being alive. Every night, the body had to become weaker in order to recover enough to live the next day. That is the old contradiction at the center of sleep. The same state that repairs the body also reduces its power to respond. Alone at night, that contradiction became sharper. There was no nearby person to notice the first sign of trouble while the sleeper was still buried in rest. There was no other body to turn, listen, rise, or touch a shoulder. The ancient sleeper had to trust a body that was temporarily designed not to defend itself well. Human beings did not evolve as heavily armored creatures. We did not carry shells, horns, thick hides, or large jaws strong enough to make us safe while unconscious. Our strength came from awareness, tools, fire, language, memory, and cooperation. But sleep takes awareness and lowers it. It takes the tool-making hand and opens it. It takes the speaking mouth and makes it silent. It takes the watchful face and turns it toward dreams. A person sleeping alone was not simply a person resting. They were a human body without most of the advantages that made humans dangerous, clever, and difficult to approach. This does not mean ancient people thought about sleep in scientific terms. They did not need to. They would have known the body's weakness through ordinary experience. Someone who woke too slowly could miss a sound. Someone who slept too far from the fire could become cold before noticing. Someone alone could be bitten, startled, lost, or approached before fully understanding what was happening. In the deep past, the first protection around a sleeping human was often not a structure. It was the presence of other waking and half-waking minds nearby. Even in sleep, humans are not completely cut off from the world. The brain can still respond to certain sounds, especially sudden noises, voices, cries, or signs that something has changed. But that response is uneven. A tired body may sleep deeply. A cold body may become sluggish. A sick body may not wake quickly. A child may not understand danger. An older person may move slowly. A lone adult may wake but need several moments to know where they are. In daylight, those moments might not matter much. At night, under open sky or near the edge of a camp, they could matter more. The human body was built for cycles of activity and rest, but the ancient environment was not arranged around human comfort. The dark did not wait for everyone to be ready. Wind moved. Embers faded. Animals crossed ground. Other people, from nearby groups, may have travelled or watched. The sleeping body had to exist inside all of that. Near others, weakness could be spread out. One person's deep sleep could be balanced by another person's lighter sleep. One person's poor hearing could be balanced by another person's alertness. A mother might wake to a child. A child might stir and wake an adult. Someone near the fire might notice the cold sooner. Someone at the edge of a group might hear movement first. No plan had to be perfect. The point was that the sleeper did not have to carry vulnerability alone. This is why sleeping alone at night would have been more than an emotional discomfort. It placed the most defenseless version of the human body into the least readable time of day. The fear that followed was not irrational. It was tied to the body's own nightly surrender. Ancient humans may have feared sleeping alone because sleep briefly turned a social, tool-using, watchful creature back into something softer, slower, and easier to harm. And the safest answer to that softness was often another human close enough to wake. The weakness of sleep is not only that the body stops moving, it is that the body gives up control in layers. First, the eyes stop giving fresh information. Then the muscles release their readiness. Then the mind begins to drift away from the place where the body is lying. A person may still hear the world, but hearing becomes selective and uncertain. A sound may enter sleep as a dream before it becomes a warning. A touch may be felt before it is understood. A sudden coldness may be noticed only after the body has already lost warmth. For ancient humans, This layered surrender made sleep one of the most delicate states of life. It was necessary, but it was never completely safe. During the day, a human body could use its whole system together. Eyes, hands, feet, memory, speech, and group attention could join into one working pattern. At night, in sleep, that pattern loosened. The body remained alive, but the person was no longer fully present to defend it. This is why sleeping alone carried a special weight. Alone, the body had no outside layer of awareness to cover what sleep had taken away. Near others, the sleeping person was held inside a wider field of attention, even if no one was fully awake. The human body also changes its relationship with temperature during sleep. It does not behave like a stone that simply stays the same. It loses and manages heat in ways that depend on air, ground, clothing, covering, fire, and nearby bodies. In warm climates, this may not always have been dangerous, but in cold nights, damp places, windy camps, or exposed Ice Age landscapes, the loss of warmth could matter greatly. A person alone could cool slowly without noticing at first. The ground could draw heat away, a fire could fade, a covering could shift. Rain or mist could change the air. In a group, warmth was not only a comfort, it was information and protection. People sleeping near one another could share heat, notice movement, hear shivering, and wake when a child or older person became restless. In the long beginning of human life, warmth and safety were often not separate things. They were joined in the same circle of bodies, embers, breath, and shelter. There is another quiet vulnerability in sleep: posture. A standing human can turn, run, climb, strike, lift, and call. More. A sleeping human is usually low to the ground, folded, covered, or turned to one side. The head may face away from danger. The hands may be trapped beneath the body or hidden under a covering. The feet may not be ready to find the ground quickly. Even waking from sleep takes time. The mind must return from dreams, name the place, find direction, understand sound, and decide whether to move. That short delay is easy to ignore in a modern room. It feels harmless when walls, locks, lights, and familiar objects surround the bed. But for ancient humans, resting on earth, near a fire, under a temporary shelter, or at the edge of a dark landscape, that delay could feel much more serious. To sleep alone was to accept that delay without help. If something changed nearby, no other person might respond before the sleeper understood it. This is not a claim that every night was filled with attack. Most nights in human life must have passed without disaster, or no group could have lived long. But survival often depends on ordinary nights, repeated again and again, where small protections reduce small risks. A person does not need to meet danger every night for caution to become part of life. It is enough that, over many generations, those who slept within reach of others were more likely to be noticed, warmed, warned, or helped when something did go wrong. The fear of sleeping alone may have grown from this repeated pattern, not from one great terror, but from thousands of quiet nights in which the body learned that rest was easier when another human body was near. This makes the ancient sleeper different from the modern idea of independence. Today, sleeping alone can feel like privacy. It can mean peace, control, and personal space. But in the older human world, sleep was not only personal. It belonged to the group, because the sleeping body could not fully belong to itself. The sleeper needed others to hold part of the night, just as others needed that sleeper on another night, in another moment, under another sky. The fear of being alone in darkness was therefore not simply fear of what might come. It was the body recognizing what had gone missing: shared warmth, shared hearing, shared waking, and the small protection of another breath close by. There is something almost fragile about the human body when it sleeps, because the very things that make humans powerful are not held in the muscles alone. A human is powerful when awake because the body can join with attention, memory, tools, language, fire, and other people. But a sleeping person has only a portion of that power left. The stone tool is nearby, but the hand is not ready. The fire may still glow, but the sleeper may not see it fading. The voice can call, but only after the mind has returned enough to know what is happening. The legs can run, but only after the body is unfolded from the ground. Sleep takes the human animal and removes it, for a while, from the web of actions that normally protects it. In the ancient night, this was a serious exchange. The body needed deep rest, yet deep rest made the body less able to guard itself. This is why sleeping alone would not only increase fear from the outside world, it would expose the weakness already created inside the sleeper. Ancient humans could not escape this weakness. No matter how skilled a person was, no matter how well they knew the land, no matter how strong their arms were, sleep still pulled them into stillness. It lowered the guard of the hunter, the gatherer, the toolmaker, the parent, the elder, and the child. A very capable person in daylight could become slow and confused in the first moments after waking. The mind might not know whether a sound belonged to a dream or to the ground nearby. The body might rise too quickly and stumble. The hand might reach in the wrong direction. The mouth might hesitate before calling. These small delays are part of being human. In a secure modern bedroom, they rarely matter. In the older world, where the sleeping place could be only a hide on the ground, a bed of leaves, a space near a hearth, or a sheltered corner beneath rock, the same delays carried more meaning. The fear of sleeping alone was partly the fear of having no one else to cover those first uncertain moments. A group did not remove the weakness of sleep, but it changed its shape. Weakness shared among several bodies became less dangerous than weakness carried alone. When one person slept deeply, another might sleep lightly. When one person was turned away, another might face outward. When one person was cold, another might feel the movement. When a child cried, more than one adult might wake. When an ember dimmed, someone might stir before darkness became complete. This kind of protection did not require perfect planning. It came from nearness. It came from the ordinary overlap of bodies resting together. The ancient camp, even when simple, could become a living shelter because human attention did not stop in one place. It moved between people. It passed through small sounds, warmth, touch, and habit. In that sense, sleeping beside others extended the body beyond its own skin. The sleeper borrowed the alertness of the group. This helps explain why being alone at night could feel so different from being alone in daylight. During the day, a person separated from others still had tools of control. They could look around. They could walk toward voices. They could climb higher ground, follow a track, read the sky, gather food, or make a choice. At night, while asleep, choice narrowed almost to nothing. The body was present, but agency was reduced. A lone sleeper had fewer ways to change the situation until after something had already disturbed them. The fear did not have to be constant or dramatic. It could be a low pressure in the body, a reluctance to lie too far away, an instinct to remain within hearing distance, a preference for the side of the fire where others were breathing. Over many generations, those quiet preferences could become part of what felt normal. The safest sleep was not necessarily the deepest sleep in the most silent place. It may have been sleep held inside a pattern of other lives. This is one reason the ancient fear of sleeping alone should not be imagined as childish or irrational. It came from a clear biological fact. The sleeping human body cannot defend itself the way the waking human body can. But it also came from a social fact just as old. Humans were never only individual bodies trying to survive separately. They survived as linked bodies, linked memories, linked senses, and linked needs. To sleep near others was to place one's vulnerability into that link. To sleep alone was to pull vulnerability back into one small body and hope that body would wake in time. The fear began there, in the quiet distance between a sleeping human and the nearest human who could notice. To sleep alone at night was to lose more than company. It was to lose the senses of the group. A human body has only 2 eyes, 2 ears, 1 nose, and 1 nervous system trying to understand the dark from a single position on the ground. A group has many angles. One person may face the fire, another may face the trees. Someone may sleep lightly because of age, illness, hunger, worry, or habit. Someone may wake to feed a child. Someone may stir when the wind changes. Without planning it carefully, a group turns the night into a wider instrument of awareness. The danger does not have to be seen by everyone. It only has to be noticed by someone. This is one of the most important reasons ancient humans may have feared sleeping alone at night. A lone sleeper was not simply missing comfort. They were missing a whole outer layer of perception. In deep human history, the body's safety did not begin and end at the skin. It extended into nearby people, into the shared fire, into remembered places, into voices, into touch, into the quiet signs of others breathing close by. When a person separated from that living field, the world did not necessarily become more dangerous at once, but it became harder to read. The difference is small in language and enormous in experience. A sound heard alone can grow inside the mind because there is no one nearby to confirm it, ignore it, answer it, or wake before it reaches you. A sound heard near others belongs to a shared space. Even if no one speaks, the presence of other bodies changes how the brain receives the dark. The ancient camp was not only a place where people slept, it was a distributed sense organ. Its strength came from many small human abilities overlapping. One person remembered where tracks had been found earlier. Another knew which calls belonged to harmless animals. Another could smell smoke changing as damp wood burned differently. Another might notice that the usual night insects had gone quiet. A child's movement could wake an adult. An elder's restlessness could signal cold. A dog, in later periods where dogs were present, may have added another layer of hearing and smell. But even before that, human groups already carried a kind of collective watchfulness. Archaeology gives us hearths, shelters, sleeping areas, repeated campsites, traces of social living, and evidence that humans were deeply cooperative creatures. It cannot give us every night sound, every whispered warning, or every person who woke before danger became clear. But the broader pattern is steady. Humans survived not as isolated bodies, but as groups whose senses, knowledge, and labour were shared. In the darkness, this mattered even more. Daylight lets a person compensate for being alone. They can scan a slope, watch the movement of grass, see the sky, follow a trail, and judge distance. Night removes many of those corrections. If someone is alone and half asleep, the sound of movement may come from any direction. The body may wake, but not fully. The mind may search for meaning while still tangled in dreams. A group reduces that burden. It does not make every sound safe, but it places uncertainty into more than one mind. One person's fear can be balanced by another person's calm. One person's confusion can be steadied by another person's memory. One person's slow waking can be covered by another person already alert. This is why sleeping close to others could be a survival technology long before houses became permanent. It was not made of stone, wood, or bone. It was made of attention. It was made of the fact that humans could borrow safety from one another simply by remaining near. To sleep alone was to give up that borrowed safety. It meant that if the fire dimmed, only you might notice. If cold moved in, only your body might feel it. If something passed near the sleeping place, only your ears could receive it. If you failed to wake, there was no second nervous system beside you to take over. For ancient humans, whose lives began in landscapes without locked rooms or artificial light, that loss may have felt physical. The empty space beside the body was not neutral. It was the absence of extra hearing, extra warmth, extra memory, and extra waking. The fear of sleeping alone at night began in that absence. In the moment when the human animal had to face the dark with only its own sleeping senses, one of the quiet protections of a group is that not everyone notices the same thing at the same time. This difference can look small, but at night it becomes powerful. A person who has spent the day gathering near water may remember the sound of reeds moving in the wind. Another person who followed animal tracks may know the difference between light steps and heavy steps on dry ground. Someone who tends the fire may hear when wood collapses into ash. Someone sleeping near a child may wake at the smallest change in breathing. These separate pieces of attention do not belong to one mind. They belong to the group. For ancient humans, sleeping close to others meant resting inside a field of small knowledge that no lone sleeper could fully carry. The fear of sleeping alone at night begins to deepen here, because darkness does not only reduce sight, it also makes knowledge depend more heavily on memory. When the eye cannot clearly see, the mind must compare sounds, smells, wind, and silence against what it has known before. Alone, a person has only one store of memory. Near others, the night is measured against many past experiences at once. This matters because the ancient world was not a blank wilderness. It was remembered land. Human groups knew where animals moved, where water gathered, where insects became thick, where branches cracked in dry seasons, where cold air settled, and where strangers might pass. That knowledge lived in people. It was not written down. It was not stored in maps. It was carried in bodies that had walked, listened, smelled smoke, watched clouds, followed tracks, and survived earlier nights. When people slept near one another, that living archive did not vanish. Even half asleep, it remained nearby. A sudden sound might wake the person most likely to understand it. A change in weather might be felt first by someone used to sleeping near the edge of shelter. A restless child might wake a mother, an aunt, an older sibling, or another adult who knew the meaning of that restlessness. In this way, the group made night less unknown. It did not remove danger, but it surrounded danger with interpretation. To sleep alone was to step outside that archive. It meant that every sound had to pass through one tired mind before it could become knowledge. The senses of the group also included emotional signals. Humans are deeply responsive to the state of other humans. We hear fear in a breath before we may understand its cause. We notice sudden stillness. We react when someone sits up quickly, whispers, reaches, or turns toward the dark. In an ancient camp, one body becoming alert could spread awareness without a full alarm. A person did not need to explain everything. Movement itself could carry meaning. This is part of what made human closeness protective. It allowed danger, uncertainty, or caution to travel through the group faster than words alone. A lone sleeper had no such signal around them. If fear rose in the body, it remained private. If confusion delayed action, no one else could convert that confusion into response. This is why the absence of people at night could feel so large. It removed not only companionship, but the chain through which human bodies warn one another. In the long beginning of human life, this chain may have been as important as any tool. A stone blade, a wooden spear, or a burning branch mattered only if someone was awake enough to use it. Shared awareness helped bring the tool-using human back into action when sleep had pulled them away from it. The group did not need to stay awake all night as soldiers. It only needed to make full unconsciousness less complete across the whole camp. Some people slept deeply, some slept lightly, some woke often, some drifted in and out. Children stirred. Elders shifted. Adults listened without meaning to. The result was not perfect safety, but a kind of uneven watchfulness. That unevenness may have been enough to make sleeping together feel normal and sleeping alone feel exposed. The ancient fear of being alone at night, then, was not only fear of an animal in the dark, it was fear of being cut off from the many small human systems that made the dark understandable. Memory, attention, reaction, warmth, emotion, and shared alarm. A single body could rest, but it could not become a camp by itself. It could not hold every direction, every memory, every warning sound, and every possible response. To lie alone in the ancient night was to shrink the human world down to one sleeping nervous system, while the land around it remained wide, moving, and unread. One quiet protection of a group is that not everyone notices the same thing at the same time. In daylight, this may seem ordinary. At night, it becomes powerful. One person may know the sound of reeds moving beside water. Another may remember how dry branches crack when a heavier animal steps on them. Someone close to the fire may hear when wood collapses into ash. Someone sleeping near a child may wake at the smallest change in breathing. These pieces of attention do not belong to one mind. They belong to the group. For ancient humans, sleeping close to others meant resting inside a field of small knowledge that no lone sleeper could fully carry. Darkness does not only reduce sight, it also forces the mind to depend more on memory. When the eyes cannot clearly see, the body must compare sound, smell, wind, cold, and silence with what it has known before. Alone, a person has only one store of memory. Near others, the night is measured against many past experiences at once. This mattered because the ancient world was not empty wilderness to the people who lived inside it. It was remembered land. Human groups knew where animals moved, where water gathered, where insects became thick, where cold air settled, where stones became slippery, and where strangers might pass. That knowledge was not written down. It lived in bodies that had walked, listened, watched smoke, followed tracks, and survived earlier nights. When people slept near one another, that living memory remained close. A sudden sound might wake the person most likely to understand it. A change in wind might be felt first by someone used to sleeping near the edge of shelter. A restless child might wake an adult who knew whether the child was cold, frightened, or only turning in sleep. In this way, the group made night less unknown. It did not remove danger, but it surrounded danger with interpretation. To sleep alone was to step outside that shared memory. Every sound had to pass through one tired mind before it could become knowledge. The senses of the group also included emotional signals. Humans are deeply responsive to other humans. We hear fear in a breath before we understand its cause. We notice sudden stillness. We react when someone sits up quickly, whispers, reaches, or turns toward the dark. In an ancient camp, one body becoming alert could spread awareness without a loud alarm. Movement itself could carry meaning. This made closeness protective. It allowed caution to travel from one body to another before words were needed. A lone sleeper had no such signal nearby. If fear rose in the body, it remained private. If confusion delayed action, no one else could turn that confusion into response. This is why absence at night could feel so large. It removed not only company, but the chain through which humans warned one another. In the long beginning of human life, that chain may have been as important as any tool. A stone blade, a wooden spear, or a burning branch mattered only if someone was awake enough to use it. Shared awareness helped bring the tool-using human back into action when sleep had pulled them away from the world. The group did not need to stay awake all night. It only needed to make full unconsciousness less complete across the camp. Some slept deeply, some slept lightly, some woke often, children stirred, elders shifted, adults listened without meaning to. The result was not perfect safety, but uneven watchfulness. That may have been enough to make sleeping together feel normal and sleeping alone feel exposed. A person sleeping alone loses the group's senses, but they also lose the group's correction. This matters because fear grows easily when a tired mind has no answer from another human being. A sound in the grass may be wind. It may be a small animal. It may be something larger, farther away than it seems, or closer than the sleeper wants to believe. Alone, the mind must decide while still half inside sleep. Near others, the same sound enters a wider human field. If no one else stirs, the body may settle. If another person wakes, the meaning changes. If someone reaches for the fire, whispers, sits upright, or turns toward the edge of camp, uncertainty begins to become action. For ancient humans, this shared correction may have made the difference between useless fear and useful caution. It allowed the group to sort the night together, instead of leaving one half-awake body to carry every possible meaning alone. The deep past of our species was not built around private bedrooms or sealed doors. It was built around bodies near bodies, because human awareness became stronger when it was joined. A sleeping place was part of that joined awareness. A person did not only borrow warmth from the group, they borrowed judgment. They borrowed the calm of someone who knew the sound was ordinary, and the alertness of someone who sensed that it was not. This made sleeping alone feel wrong in a way that was not only emotional, it meant removing the tired brain from the very system that helped it interpret danger. That system began long before writing, before cities, before permanent walls, and before the modern idea that safety means being sealed away from others. For most ancient humans, safety was probably more fluid. It existed in distance from the fire, nearness to trusted people, knowledge of the land, and the ability of the group to notice change. A lone sleeper was outside much of that. Even if nothing approached, even if the night passed quietly, the body had fewer signs confirming that it was safe. This absence itself could disturb sleep. The ears might search more, the mind might wake more often. The body might remain closer to readiness, not because danger was already present, but because the normal signals of human nearness were missing. In this way, fear of sleeping alone may have been tied to the need for sleep itself. To rest deeply, the body needs enough trust to release its guard. In the ancient world, trust often came from the group. It came from breathing nearby, from small movements, from embers tended by someone, from children and adults gathered in the same protected space. Archaeology cannot record trust directly, but it can show the long human habit of gathering, making hearths, sharing shelters, and returning to places where social life centered around fire and protection. These traces point toward a species whose survival was not isolated. The group became part of the environment, almost like warmth, shadow, or light. Losing it at night could feel like losing a sense. This is why the fear was not just about darkness, and not just about predators. It was about being left with only one body's hearing, one body's memory, one body's judgment, and one body's slow waking. The ancient night was too wide for that to feel complete. Humans learned to sleep inside a circle of other humans because the circle made the dark smaller. It gave the sleeper a way to be vulnerable without being entirely alone. And when someone drifted too far from that circle, the silence around them was not empty. It was the missing sound of protection, the missing warmth of shared attention, and the old warning that one human body was never meant to hold the whole night by itself. Fire changed the ancient night, but it did not erase it. This is important, because it is easy to imagine a campfire as a perfect wall of safety, glowing between humans and everything outside. In reality, fire was more complicated. It gave warmth, light, smoke, and a center for the group. It could discourage some animals, make the nearby ground visible, dry damp clothing or hides, and help people remain together after sunset. But fire also had limits. Its light reached only so far. Beyond the circle of brightness, the land still continued. Trees, rocks, grass, slopes, riverbanks, animal paths, and hollow spaces did not disappear. They simply moved into shadow. For ancient humans, this meant that the campfire made the night smaller, but it did not make the night harmless. A person sleeping alone outside the shared circle would still be beyond much of what fire could protect. Even near the fire, safety depended on people tending it, noticing it, feeding it, and arranging themselves around it. Fire was not an automatic guardian. It was a living tool that needed human attention. If everyone slept too deeply, embers could fade. If wind changed, smoke could shift. If rain came, the fire could weaken. If fuel ran low, the bright edge of the human world could shrink. This made sleeping alone especially uncertain. A lone sleeper might have a small fire, but they would also have to be the one who guarded it, fed it, interpreted every sound beyond it, and woke before it died. In the deep human past, that was a heavy burden for one tired body. The group made fire stronger because the group gave fire memory and care. Someone remembered where dry wood had been placed. Someone noticed when smoke blew towards sleepers. Someone woke when sparks changed. Someone pulled a child closer. Someone shifted away from cold ground. Someone might wake before dawn and bring the fire back from a bed of coals. The fire protected people, but people also protected the fire. This relationship is part of why sleeping near others mattered. The camp was not simply a place where flames burned. It was a shared system of warmth, light, attention, and habit. A person alone had only a fragment of that system. Ancient predators also remind us why fire did not solve every problem. Humans have lived in landscapes where large carnivores existed, though the exact animals and risks varied by region and period. Lions, hyenas, leopards, wolves, bears, and other animals were not present everywhere, and they did not attack humans every night. But ancient people did not need constant attack for caution to matter. They only needed to know that the dark could hold other living beings whose senses worked differently from ours. Some animals could smell what humans could not smell. Some could hear movement at a distance. Some could move quietly around the edge of light. Fire might make approach less likely, but it did not give a sleeping human full control over the land beyond the glow. There were also human dangers. Not every group in the ancient world was an enemy, and cooperation between groups likely existed in many forms. But strangers at night could still be uncertain. A campfire could reveal where people were. It could guide friends, but it could also announce a sleeping place. This made the presence of a group even more important. More people meant more ears, more judgment, more ability to wake, move, speak, or respond. Alone, a person had to trust one fire, one pair of ears, one tired mind, and one body that would soon become slow with sleep. In a group, the fire became part of a wider protection. It sat among voices, bodies, tools, knowledge, children, elders, and shared alertness. The darkness beyond it still existed, but it was faced by more than one human life. For ancient humans, Fear at night was not only fear of what waited outside the light, it was also fear of being the only person responsible for keeping the light meaningful. Fire also changed the way darkness behaved around human beings. Without flame, night could press evenly from every direction. With flame, the world became divided. There was the near space, lit by orange movement, where faces could be seen, hands could work, children could be pulled closer, and tools could be found. Then there was the far space, beyond the reach of light, where the same land continued but became less certain. This division may have shaped ancient fear in a very quiet way. The fire gave people a center, but it also made the edge more visible. A person could see where human safety seemed to end. Beyond that boundary, the mind had to imagine what the eyes could not confirm. For someone sleeping with others, that edge belonged to the camp. For someone sleeping alone, the edge belonged only to one body. The fire may have warmed the skin, but it could not widen one person's hearing, multiply one person's memory, or keep one person awake through the whole night. Ancient humans likely understood fire through long use rather than through explanation. They knew that dry wood burned differently from damp wood. They knew that embers could survive under ash. They knew that smoke could drive away insects in some conditions, but also sting the eyes and throat. They knew that a small flame could comfort a group, and that a dying fire could change the feeling of a place. But this knowledge was practical, fragile, and dependent on care. A fire that was strong at dusk might be weak before dawn. A fire that seemed protected might scatter sparks in wind. A fire placed badly could smoke the sleepers or fail to warm them. A person alone would have to manage all of this while also sleeping, listening, and staying warm. In a group, these burdens could be divided without anyone naming them. One person might wake because the air had cooled. Another might shift fuel closer. Another might notice that a child had rolled away from warmth. Another might sense that the firelight no longer reached the edge of the sleeping space. The campfire, then, was not only an object. It was a relationship between flame and group attention. This matters because fire's protection was never purely physical. It was also psychological. It gave the human brain a smaller world to trust. Faces in firelight reminded the body that others were near. Moving shadows on familiar bodies were different from moving shadows beyond the camp. A voice beside the fire could calm uncertainty. A hand adding wood could tell the half-sleeping mind that someone else was still partly holding the night. Sleeping alone removed many of these signals. A lone fire could almost make the darkness feel more intimate, because the person could see the small circle of safety and also feel how much lay outside it. The flame might crackle, but no other breath answered. The smoke might move, but no one else noticed its direction. The ember might fade, but no shared habit restored it. In the ancient beginning of human life, this difference could enter the body as unease, not a dramatic terror, but the simple feeling that one fire and one sleeper were not enough to turn night into a human place. Predators are often the first danger people imagine, and they were part of the ancient world in many regions, but the larger point is broader than predators. Fire could reduce some risks while leaving many others in place. Cold could still creep under the body, rain could still soak the ground, smoke could reveal a location, darkness could still hide holes, snakes in some environments, sharp stones, strangers, or the movement of animals passing nearby. The fire did not remove the need for the group, it made the group more effective. It gathered people into a visible center, helped maintain warmth, and gave their senses a shared point of reference. To sleep alone was to separate from that combined system. It meant trying to make a camp out of one body, one flame, and one fading circle of light. For ancient humans, the fear was not that fire had no power. The fear was that fire's power became incomplete when there was no one else close enough to tend it, read it, and wake beside it. Fire could make humans feel less alone, but it could not replace other humans. That difference sits at the center of why the ancient night remained uneasy. A flame can warm the hands, brighten the ground, and push darkness back for a little distance, but it cannot listen with understanding. It cannot decide whether a sound is ordinary. It cannot remember that the same animal called from the same ridge the night before. It cannot wake a child, steady an elder, or touch a sleeping shoulder. Fire was one of the greatest tools humans ever learned to use, yet its power depended on the social world around it. When people gathered near it, fire became a center of protection. When one person slept beside it alone, fire became only a small island in a much larger dark. The light might hold for a while, but the sleeper still had to trust that nothing important would happen beyond their reach, beyond their hearing, and beyond the moment when sleep made them slow. In ancient landscapes, that trust may have been difficult to give. The dark outside the fire was not evil, and it was not always dangerous, but it was alive. Animals moved through it for their own reasons. Wind carried scents. Cold settled into low ground. Insects rose in damp air. Branches cracked as wood cooled or as creatures passed. Sometimes nothing was coming. Sometimes a sound meant only weather. But the sleeping mind could not know this with certainty. Near a group, uncertainty could be shared, softened, and corrected. Alone, it could circle inside the body. This is why the limits of fire are so important. Fire gave humans a way to create a human center in the night, but the group gave that center meaning. The group decided where to sleep, who stayed close to children, who rested near the edge, where fuel was kept, how close the bodies gathered, and how long the embers should last. Even without formal planning, these choices turned flame into a social shelter. A lone sleeper had to make all those choices once, then surrender to sleep and hope they remained enough. That is a very different kind of safety. It is not shared safety. It is a fragile arrangement held by one tired nervous system. The long human past likely taught bodies to notice that difference. A camp with several people near the fire carried signs of continuity. Someone moved. Someone breathed. Someone coughed. Someone turned. Someone woke and settled again. These small signs told the body that the human world was still present. A person sleeping alone might hear only flame, wind, insects, and the movement of things unseen. Fire could comfort, but it could also reveal the silence where people were missing. It could show the empty space around the sleeper more clearly. The glow that made the ground visible could also make the darkness beyond it feel deeper. This does not mean ancient humans were constantly afraid. Many nights were probably ordinary, and skilled people knew their camps, tools, fires, and landscapes with great care. But ordinary safety in the ancient world was often built through repeated small protections, not one perfect defense. Fire was one protection, group sleep was another, knowledge of place was another. Tools, shelters, smoke, warmth, and habit all worked together. Remove the group, and fire lost part of its strength. Remove fire, and the group lost part of its night center. Ancient humans survived because these protections overlapped. Sleeping alone broke the overlap. It left the body with fewer layers between sleep and the unknown. For this reason, the fear of sleeping alone at night was not a superstition floating above real life. It grew from the practical limits of every protection humans had. Fire was powerful, but it needed tending. Tools were useful, but they needed waking hands. Knowledge was valuable, but it lived better in many minds. A shelter helped, but it did not hear. A single body could rest, but it could not become a full camp. So when ancient humans feared sleeping alone, they were not only fearing darkness or predators, they were sensing that the protections of human life worked best together, and that one person, one fire, and one small circle of light could never carry the whole night safely by themselves. Even now, the human brain does not fully sleep as if the world has become harmless. It lowers its guard, but it does not close every gate. A sudden sound can still pull a person toward waking. A voice can enter sleep differently from ordinary noise. A strange creak in a quiet room can feel larger at night than it would in the afternoon. This does not prove that every modern fear comes directly from the ancient world, but it does show something important about the sleeping brain. Sleep is not a simple disappearance from reality. It is a careful balance between rest and watchfulness. For ancient humans, that balance would have mattered every night. The body needed enough sleep to heal, remember, move, learn, and stay alive. But the brain also needed to remain able to notice signs that the environment had changed. When people slept alone, this balance may have tilted toward unease, because there were fewer outside signals telling the brain that it was safe to sink deeply into rest. The night brain is especially sensitive to uncertainty. During the day, a person can check a sound by looking, walking, asking, touching, or moving closer. At night, especially while lying down, The brain has fewer ways to confirm what is happening, so it may listen harder. It may turn small signals into questions. Was that wind or footsteps? Was that the fire settling? Or something moving near the edge of camp? Was that another person turning in sleep? Or the absence of people that made the silence feel wrong? In the long beginning of human life, these questions were not abstract thoughts. They were body questions. They rose through the ears, skin, breath, and heartbeat. A lone sleeper had to answer them with one tired nervous system. A sleeper inside a group could let some of those questions be held by others. This is why the brain may feel calmer when another trusted person is nearby. Even if that person is asleep, their presence changes the meaning of the night. It tells the body that awareness is shared. The ancient brain did not need perfect safety. It needed enough signs of belonging to release its grip. Many researchers describe human beings as deeply social animals, and this is not just about conversation or emotion. It reaches into basic survival. Our nervous systems respond to other nervous systems. A calm person can make a place feel calmer. A sudden movement can wake caution. A familiar breathing pattern can become part of the background that allows sleep. In ancient camps, these signals may have surrounded the sleeper. The sound of breathing nearby, the shift of bodies, the quiet movement of someone tending embers, the presence of children and elders within reach, the smell of smoke and people together, all could become part of a night pattern the brain understood. Alone, those signals were missing. The brain might not name the absence, but the body could feel it. The emptiness beside the sleeper was not only emotional emptiness, it was missing information. It was missing confirmation that the human circle still held. This helps explain why the fear of sleeping alone at night can feel older than thought. It may not arrive as a clear idea. It can arrive as listening too much, waking for no obvious reason, feeling that the room or shelter is too still, or wanting another presence nearby. Modern life gives us walls, locks, lights, and many forms of safety ancient people did not have. But the brain was not shaped only by modern rooms. It carries older patterns of caution that were useful when night was open, when sleep was vulnerable, and when humans survived through nearness. Ancient humans may have feared sleeping alone because the brain itself was not built to treat isolated sleep as the safest form of rest. It was built to rest best when the dark was shared. The brain that listens at night is not always looking for a monster. Often, it is looking for a pattern. It wants the world to sound the way it should sound when nothing has changed. This may be why an unfamiliar silence can feel as disturbing as an unfamiliar noise. In an ancient camp, normal night was not silent. There might be fire sounds, insects, wind, breathing, small movements, children shifting, someone coughing, someone turning over, or distant animals calling in the dark. These sounds formed a background of expected life. The sleeping brain could place itself inside that background and rest more easily. But when a person slept alone, the background changed. There were fewer human sounds to confirm belonging. There was no nearby breathing to measure against the dark. There was no small movement from another sleeper, no quiet cough, no hand-stirring embers, no familiar body turning in the same shelter. The absence of these signs could make the brain listen harder, because the night no longer carried the pattern it had learned to trust. In deep human history, this pattern mattered because the brain was not only protecting one person from sudden danger, it was helping the body decide how deeply it could sleep. Deep sleep is valuable, but it also reduces awareness. Lighter sleep keeps the person closer to waking, but it may leave the body less restored. A lone sleeper may have been pushed toward lighter, more broken rest, not because danger was certain, but because the brain had less evidence that danger was being shared. Near others, the sleeper could afford a different kind of trust. Someone else might wake first. Someone else might hear the change. Someone else might already be half aware. The brain did not need to hold the whole night alone. This is one reason human closeness may have supported sleep long before anyone thought of sleep as private. Rest was not just something the body did. It was something the group made possible. The ancient brain also learned through repetition. If, night after night, safety came with firelight, voices, warmth, and other bodies nearby, then those signs could become linked with rest. If, night after night, being separated brought cold, uncertainty, and too much listening, then separation could become linked with unease. This kind of learning does not require language. The body records patterns through sensation. The smell of smoke, the touch of ground, the rhythm of others sleeping, the distance of voices, and the feel of warmth on one side of the body could all become part of what safety meant. Alone, many of those cues disappeared at once. The brain might not explain the loss, but it could respond to it. It could keep waking. It could search the dark. It could treat ordinary sounds as unfinished questions. Modern people may recognize a faint version of this when a house feels too quiet, when a small sound at night seems larger than it should, or when sleep comes more easily because another person is nearby. This does not mean modern fear is exactly the same as ancient fear. Our rooms, habits, and dangers have changed, but the older pattern remains understandable. Human sleep evolved in bodies that were rarely sealed away from the world, and rarely meant to be fully alone. The brain's night watchfulness was not a flaw, it was a careful compromise between rest and survival. For ancient humans, sleeping alone disturbed that compromise. It took away the familiar signals that told the brain the human circle was still present. Without those signals, the dark became harder to trust, and the mind had to keep listening for what the group was no longer there to hear. The brain's night watchfulness becomes easier to understand when we remember that ancient sleep was not protected by certainty. It was protected by enough trust. A person did not need to know that every animal was far away, every stranger was absent, every ember would last, and every sound was harmless. No human could know that. The body only needed enough signs that it was not facing the night alone. This is where the ancient fear of sleeping alone becomes less mysterious. The brain could rest more deeply when other humans helped carry the unknown. Their presence did not give perfect safety, but it reduced the need for one mind to question everything. A familiar breath nearby could be a signal. A quiet movement near the fire could be a signal. The warmth of another body, the smell of smoke held among people, the shape of sleeping figures in low light, and the ordinary sounds of a group at rest could all tell the brain that the human world was still intact. Alone, the brain had to replace those signals with listening. It had to listen to wind, insects, branches, distant calls, its own heartbeat, and the silence where people should have been. That kind of listening can keep sleep shallow. In the long beginning of human life, shallow sleep was not always bad. It could help a person wake quickly when something changed. But if shallow sleep became the only way to sleep, the body paid a cost. A tired person moves less carefully. They may misread tracks, forget small details, grow cold more easily, lose patience, or make poor choices during the next day's travel, gathering, hunting, or care of children. So the fear of sleeping alone was connected not only to one night's danger, but to the next day's survival. Good sleep helped the group live. Shared safety helped good sleep happen. The ancient brain, shaped inside this rhythm, would have learned that nearness was not just comfort, it was part of restoration. This may also explain why the brain can treat social absence as physical information. To a modern person, being alone in a room may be a preference. To an older layer of the nervous system, the absence of trusted people at night may still resemble a missing protection. The body may not need to form a clear thought. It may simply become more alert. It may notice small noises too strongly. It may delay deep rest. It may feel that something is unfinished. This does not mean the body is foolish. It means the body is using an old rule in a new setting. For most of human history, sleeping alone in darkness was rarely the safest default. The safer pattern was often to sleep within reach, within hearing, within the warmth and attention of others. That pattern repeated through countless nights, across changing landscapes, climates, and shelters. Over time, the brain may have treated human nearness as one of the background conditions of safe sleep, like warmth, like shelter, like dim firelight, like familiar ground. This gives the ancient fear a quiet dignity. It was not weakness. It was not childishness. It was a form of night intelligence. The brain listened because listening had value. It resisted isolation because isolation removed signals that once mattered. It kept a small part of itself near the edge of waking because the world outside the sleeping body did not stop. Ancient humans feared sleeping alone at night because the sleeping brain was never designed to trust darkness by itself. It trusted patterns, and one of the oldest patterns was the presence of other humans close enough to hear the same night. Before humans had houses, the camp was the first true protection. It may not have looked like much from a distance. A few bodies near a fire, some tools placed within reach, children close to adults, older people settled where warmth was steady, fuel gathered nearby, a shelter of branches, hides, grass, or stone above the head. Yet inside that simple arrangement, something important was happening. The camp turned open land into human space. It did not remove the night, but it gave the night a center. It told the body where warmth was, where familiar people were, where voices might come from, where help could be found if sleep was broken suddenly. For ancient humans, this mattered because safety was not only a matter of strong arms or sharp tools. Safety was arrangement. Where people lay down, how close they stayed, how the fire was kept, who slept near children, who rested near the outer edge, and how the group used the shape of the land could all change the meaning of darkness. A lone sleeper had a place on the ground. A group sleeper had a position inside a living pattern. This difference may have shaped the feeling of night for countless generations. The ancient camp was not a house in the modern sense, but it carried some of the same functions. Before walls became common, it created an inside and an outside. The inside was not sealed. Wind could still pass through. Sounds could still enter. Animals could still move beyond the light. Cold could still come from the earth. But the inside was marked by human nearness. A child could reach an adult. An adult could hear another adult turn. A person could find firelight by opening their eyes. A tool could be close enough for waking hands. The ground had been chosen, not randomly taken. It might be slightly raised, sheltered from wind, close to water but not too close, near fuel but not buried in thick brush, open enough to see movement, protected enough to rest. These choices were part of survival. They show how ancient humans did not simply endure the night. They shaped small pockets of order inside it. Sleeping alone meant stepping outside that order, or trying to rebuild it with only one body. The camp also gathered time. It held the memory of the day that had just passed, and the plan of the morning to come. Food may have been shared there. Stones may have been shaped there. Skins may have been scraped. Children may have watched adults repair tools or prepare wood. Stories, gestures, warnings, and ordinary talk may have passed through the group as darkness came down. Even without permanent walls, the sleeping place became tied to relationship. People did not lie down as separate animals scattered across the land. They rested in relation to one another. This is one reason the fear of sleeping alone was not only fear of danger. It was fear of falling out of the human arrangement that made danger manageable. The camp held warmth, but also attention. It held habit, but also trust. It held the knowledge that if something changed in the night, the change would not belong to one person alone. In the deep past, this may have been one of the most powerful forms of shelter humans had. Not shelter as a fixed building, but shelter as a circle of bodies, fire, memory, and shared response. Archaeology can show hearths, repeated occupation sites, shelters, tools, and traces of food and activity. But the emotional meaning of a camp has to be understood through the kind of animal humans are. We are bodies that become safer in coordinated groups. We sleep better when enough signs tell us the world is held. For ancient humans, the camp gave those signs. A lone place in the dark gave fewer of them. That is why sleeping alone at night could feel like more than being away from people. It could feel like being outside the first human home, before home had walls, before home had doors. When home was still the sound of others breathing around the fire, a camp protected ancient humans not only because people were together, but because togetherness created positions. The group did not have to be arranged like a modern plan on paper. Even simple habits could matter. Children might sleep closer to adults. People who felt cold might move nearer the fire. Those who woke easily might rest where sounds reached them first. Older people might stay where the ground was steadier and warmth lasted longer. Tools, fuel, coverings, food scraps and water containers could be placed where hands could find them. Over time, a camp became a pattern the body understood. A person waking in the dark did not wake into complete confusion. They woke into a known arrangement of bodies, embers, smells, and distances. For ancient humans, This known arrangement was a kind of shelter. It reduced the number of questions the brain had to answer at once. Where is the fire? Where are the children? Where are the adults? Where is the edge of the group? Where is the path out? Where is the sound coming from? Sleeping alone removed many of these answers before the night even began. The lone sleeper might know the ground, but they did not have the human map around them. There was no familiar breathing on one side, no older body shifting near the warmth, no child stirring under a covering, no soft sign that the camp was still whole. The ancient camp also worked because it blended protection with ordinary life. Safety was not separated from eating, repairing, teaching, warming, remembering, and resting. Around a hearth, people could process food, shape tools, share knowledge, care for injuries, watch children, and prepare for sleep. These actions made the sleeping place feel inhabited before anyone lay down. The ground had already been touched by human work. Firewood had been gathered. Ash had collected. Stones may have been moved. Hides, grasses, or branches may have been placed to soften the ground or block wind. This mattered because ancient humans did not enter sleep from nowhere. They entered sleep from the day's social activity. The same people who helped gather food or tend children became the people whose presence made night less exposed. A lone sleeper, by contrast, had less continuity between the working day and the resting night. The body could feel as if it had stepped away from the shared rhythm that made survival possible. In many environments, the camp's shape would also have answered the landscape. A rock wall could protect one side. A cave mouth could limit approach from behind, though caves had their own risks. A river might provide water, but also sound that covered movement. A rise in the land might keep a place drier. Open ground might make approaching animals or people easier to notice. Dense brush might provide wind cover but reduce visibility. Ancient humans likely learned these trade-offs through experience, not theory. The group helped hold that experience. One person might remember that low ground became cold before dawn. Another might know that insects gathered near still water. Another might notice that smoke moved badly under certain trees. When a camp formed, all of that knowledge shaped where bodies rested. Sleeping alone meant losing access to much of this practical wisdom at the moment it mattered most. The camp was therefore more than a cluster of sleepers. It was stored experience made visible. It was memory arranged on the ground. It was human history, in its smallest nightly form, repeated before permanent villages, before written rules, and before locked doors. This is why the fear of sleeping alone at night can be understood as the fear of sleeping without structure. Not just without people, but without the old pattern that told the body how to be vulnerable safely. Near the group, vulnerability had a place. It was surrounded by warmth, known voices, shared tools, remembered ground, and other bodies that might wake. Away from the group, vulnerability became loose. It had no clear edge around it. The darkness did not have to become more dangerous for the body to feel the loss. The loss was already there, in the missing arrangement. Ancient humans feared sleeping alone because the camp was the first shape of home, and outside that shape, the sleeping body became only itself again. The first protection humans built at night may not have been a wall, but a circle of bodies, warmth, firelight, familiar smells, tools within reach, children near adults, and older people kept inside the living center of the group. This circle did not need to be perfectly round. It may have followed the shape of a rock shelter, the curve of a riverbank, the direction of wind, the spread of a hearth, or the safest patch of dry ground. What mattered was not geometry. What mattered was belonging. Inside the circle, the sleeping body was not alone with its weakness. It was held inside a pattern that made vulnerability easier to survive. Outside the circle, the same body became more exposed, not only to animals, cold or strangers, but to uncertainty itself. For ancient humans, the difference between inside and outside may have been felt before it was ever explained. A person lying near the group could hear other breathing. They could smell smoke mixed with human presence. They could wake and know where they were by the position of embers, bodies, shadows, and sounds. A person lying alone might have the same stars overhead and the same ground beneath them, but the night around them would not have the same human shape. This is why the camp can be understood as an early form of home. Home did not begin as a locked room. It began as a place where the body could become defenseless without being abandoned. It began wherever humans arranged the world so that sleep could happen. The camp also protected by making fear less private. If someone woke suddenly in the dark, the fear did not have to remain trapped inside one chest. A whisper could reach another person. A hand could touch a shoulder. A movement could alert someone nearby. Even silence could be shared. This changed the emotional weight of the night. Alone, fear has nowhere to go. It echoes inside the mind and may grow larger because no other human reaction limits it. Near others, fear enters a social space. It can be answered by calm, by action, by memory, or simply by the knowledge that someone else is present. Ancient humans may not have separated emotion from survival the way modern people often do. Fear was information. Calm was information. The behavior of others helped the brain decide whether to wake fully, settle again, move closer to the fire, or listen longer. The camp turned private alarm into shared interpretation. That was a deep kind of safety. In the long beginning of human life, this shared shelter would have mattered across generations. Children learned where to sleep by being placed near others. They learned the sounds of night while surrounded by adult bodies. Elders remained within reach of warmth and help. Adults rested in positions shaped by habit, kinship, and need. The camp carried knowledge from one night to the next, from one season to another, from older bodies to younger ones. It taught the nervous system what safety felt like. Not silence, not isolation, not complete control, but enough nearness to let the body release its guard. Sleeping alone broke that lesson. It removed the body from the oldest classroom of night survival, the place where humans learned that darkness could be endured when it was shared. This does not mean every ancient group slept in the same way, or that every person feared solitude equally. Human life has always varied with climate, landscape, culture, danger, and need. But the broader pattern is reasonable and deeply human. Our species survived by turning exposed places into shared places. The camp was one of the first ways we did that after sunset. It gathered fire, tools, memory, care, and bodies into one fragile shelter. It made the night smaller, not by destroying darkness, but by filling part of it with human presence. So when an ancient person feared sleeping alone, the fear may have come from stepping outside that presence. It was the feeling of leaving the first human shelter behind, before shelter meant walls, before safety meant locks, when the oldest door was simply another person close enough to wake. The need to sleep near others becomes even clearer when we look at the people who could not safely carry the night alone. Ancient groups were not made only of strong adults in their best years. They included infants, children, pregnant women, injured people, sick people, and elders whose speed, hearing, eyesight, or warmth might not have been the same as before. A sleeping camp was therefore not just a gathering of equal bodies. It was a living arrangement built around different kinds of vulnerability. Children could not understand the full meaning of darkness. They could become cold quickly, wake confused, wander, cry, or fail to notice danger. Elders could hold deep knowledge of places, seasons, animals, plants, and past events, yet their bodies might need more warmth and help during the night. Someone with an injury might be strong in memory but slow in movement. Someone exhausted from carrying, gathering, walking, hunting, or nursing. A child might sleep too deeply to wake at every sound. For ancient humans, sleeping alone at night would have been especially frightening because it removed the weaker body from the shared protection that made weakness survivable. The group did not protect only the strong. It protected the continuity of life itself. Infants and children are a central part of this story. Human children are born unusually dependent compared with many other animals. They need warmth, feeding, carrying, teaching, and long care. In the deep past, a child sleeping alone would have been almost unimaginable as a safe, normal pattern. A child needed bodies nearby, not only for comfort, but for heat, milk, protection, and response. A small sound from a child could wake an adult. A shift in breathing could be noticed. A cry could pull several people out of sleep. The child's fear, cold, hunger, or pain did not remain isolated. It entered the group. This mattered because human survival was never only about keeping one adult alive through one night. It was about keeping the next generation alive through many fragile nights. Sleeping close allowed adults to answer needs before they became larger problems. It also taught children what safety felt like. The earliest memory of night for a human child may not have been silence. It may have been warmth, skin, smoke, murmured voices, and the slow breathing of others nearby. Elders mattered in a different but equally important way. In many small-scale societies, older people can carry knowledge that helps younger people survive. Where food appears in hard seasons, how weather changes, which plants are useful or dangerous, how animals behave, where water may remain, and what happened in earlier times of hunger, cold, or conflict. Archaeology does not preserve every remembered lesson, but anthropology makes it clear that older knowledge can be valuable in human groups. Protecting elders at night was not only kindness, it helped protect memory. An elder sleeping near the warmth of the group, within reach of help, was part of the camp's living intelligence. To leave such a person alone in darkness would mean placing both a vulnerable body and a store of experience outside the safest human circle. This shows why ancient night fear was tied to generations, not only individuals. The camp held the very young, the very old, and everyone between them in one shared system. In that system, a strong adult might protect a child during one night, while an elder's memory might protect the whole group in another season. The weak and the strong were not fixed categories. Everyone became weak when asleep. Everyone had been a child once. Many hoped to become old. The fear of sleeping alone at night grew from this truth. Human life depended on bodies that changed over time, and no single body remained strong in every way. The group made room for those changes. It allowed people to be helpless for a while without being lost. It allowed knowledge, care, warmth, and response to pass across ages. Ancient humans may have feared sleeping alone because alone sleep broke that chain. It separated the body from the people who could hear it, warm it, remember for it, wake for it, and carry its weakness through the dark. The presence of children changed the ancient night in a deep way, because children made sleep a shared responsibility. A child does not simply become safe because danger is absent. A child becomes safe because someone notices before danger grows large. In the dark, a small body can lose warmth faster, become frightened more easily, and misunderstand the space around it. A child who wakes alone may not know where to go, which sound matters, or why the fire has become smaller. In many ancient settings, even a short distance from adults could be serious. The ground might be uneven, the air might be cold, the edge of water, brush, stone, or darkness might be too close. This is why sleeping near others was not only a comfort for the young, it was part of how the group kept the future alive. For ancient humans, the fear of sleeping alone at night would have been shaped by this constant need to protect those who could not protect themselves. A camp with children could not treat sleep as a private act. Each sleeping body was connected to another. A mother, father, sibling, grandparent, aunt, uncle, or unrelated helper might wake to a cry, a cough, a shift, or the restless movement of a child seeking warmth. Human childhood is long, and that long childhood made cooperation more important. The young needed many years of food, teaching, carrying, watching, and protection. At night, that care did not stop. It simply became quieter. A child sleeping among others was held inside a web of response. A child sleeping alone would be outside that web. This difference may have left a strong mark on what felt safe to human beings. The earliest human nights were likely learned beside other bodies, not in isolation. Warmth, smell, breath, skin, smoke, and low voices may have been among the first signs that the world was still safe enough to sleep. Elders added another layer to this pattern. An older person might not move quickly in the dark, but they might carry knowledge that younger adults needed. They could remember old paths, dry seasons, animal behavior, plant use, storms, losses, births, places to avoid, and places that had once saved the group. In oral societies, memory is not an object stored elsewhere. It lives in people. An elder sleeping near the center of a camp was not merely someone being protected. They were part of the group's long memory being kept alive. At night, their body might need warmth and help. In another season, their knowledge might help others find food, read danger, or make a better decision. This makes the ancient sleeping group more than a cluster of bodies trying to survive until morning. It was a chain between generations. The The very young carried the future. The old carried the past. Adults carried the labor of the present. Sleep gathered all three into one vulnerable space. To sleep alone was to step outside that chain, even if only for a night. It meant that weakness, memory, care, and response no longer overlapped around the body. This is why the ancient fear of sleeping alone cannot be understood only through predators or darkness. It also belongs to family, dependence, and time. Humans survived because care moved across ages. The strong did not remain strong forever. The weak did not remain weak in the same way. A child protected in one season could become an adult protector later. An adult exhausted today might need another person's attention tonight. An elder who needed warmth might give knowledge that protected many lives tomorrow. Sleeping close allowed these exchanges to continue even while people rested. It made vulnerability part of a shared rhythm rather than a private danger. In the long beginning of human life, being alone at night could therefore feel wrong, because it broke one of the oldest human arrangements: the young near the caring, the old near the warm, the tired near the watchful, and every sleeping body close enough to be noticed before it was too late. The ancient fear of sleeping alone becomes most understandable when we see the night as a test of the whole group, not only of one person. A camp had to carry many kinds of human weakness at the same time. A baby could not explain what was wrong. A child might wake frightened and move toward the wrong sound. An exhausted adult might sleep too deeply after a long day of walking, gathering, carrying, or hunting. A wounded person might need help turning, warming, or rising. An elder might hear poorly, see less clearly, or feel the cold sooner than others. These differences did not make the group weaker in a simple way. They made the group more dependent on arrangement, nearness, and care. At night, survival was not only about who was strongest. It was about whether everyone's weakness could be held inside a shared pattern. Sleeping alone broke that pattern. It placed one body outside the web of help that allowed humans to live with children who needed years of care, elders who carried memory, and adults who could not remain alert forever. This is why fear of sleeping alone was tied to the structure of human life itself. Our species did not survive by producing young that could run immediately, feed themselves quickly, and sleep safely away from adults. Human young needed long protection. That long dependence shaped camps, movement, food sharing, teaching, and sleep. The night had to be organized around care because the future of the group was lying there in small bodies that could not yet understand the world. A child near the fire was not only warmer, the child was reachable. A child near adults could be heard. A child who stirred could be touched, fed, covered, or calmed before fear became movement, before cold became deeper, before crying carried too far into the dark. In this sense, ancient sleep was part of human parenting, and parenting was part of survival. A person sleeping alone stood outside that old system of response. They had no one to answer their weakness in the way adults answered a child, or children later learned to answer others. The same pattern applied to elders, though in a quieter form. An older body might be slower, but an older mind could hold seasons that younger people had never seen. It could remember drought, cold, hunger, animal movement, useful plants, dangerous places, births, deaths, conflicts, and returns. In small human groups, such memory could matter deeply. Protecting elders through the night was not only affection, it was also a way of protecting the group's long experience. Near the fire, near other bodies, an elder could remain inside the circle where help was possible. Outside that circle, both body and memory became more exposed. The ancient camp therefore held past and future close together. Children carried what might come. Elders carried what had been learned. Adults carried the difficult present between them. Night gathered all of this into one vulnerable space. This helps explain why sleeping alone could feel like a deeper separation than simply being away from people. It meant leaving the chain of generations, the quiet exchange where one age protects another. The strong adult who guarded a child might one day need help from that child grown older. The child, warmed by many bodies, might later tend the fire for elders. The elder kept safe through winter nights might later guide the group through a hard season with remembered knowledge. Sleep close to others allowed these exchanges to continue without speech. It placed the helpless, the tired, the knowing, and the young into one living shelter. Ancient humans may have feared sleeping alone, because being alone at night did not match the way human life was built. Human life was built across ages. It was built through care that moved forward and backward through time. The night exposed every break in that care. Alone, a person had only their own warmth, hearing, memory, and waking. Near others, a person belonged to a chain older than any wall. The young near the caring, the old near the warm, the tired near the watchful, and every sleeping body close enough to be noticed. Loneliness at night may feel like an emotion, but in the ancient world it could also be a physical condition. To be alone after sunset was not only to miss another voice, it was to lose warmth, shared hearing, shared memory, and the simple fact that someone else could notice if the body failed to wake. Modern people often think of loneliness as something inside the mind, a sadness, an emptiness, or a need for company. But for most of human history, being alone could change the body's real level of danger. A person separated from the group had less protection from cold, less help if injured, less warning if something moved nearby, and less chance of being found quickly if something went wrong. At night, this danger became sharper because the body was preparing to sleep. The person was not only alone, they were alone at the exact time when vision weakened, movement slowed, warmth mattered more, and the mind needed trust before it could rest deeply. This is why ancient loneliness may have carried a heavier feeling than modern loneliness. It was not only the pain of being without people, it was the body sensing that an old layer of survival had been removed. In the deep beginning of human life, the group was not an accessory added to the individual. The group was part of how the individual stayed alive. Food was often found, shared, processed, or remembered through others. Children survived through long care. Knowledge moved through speech, imitation, gesture, and memory. Injured people could sometimes remain alive because others carried, fed, warmed, or protected them. At night, the same principle continued, in quieter form. A sleeping human depended on the nearness of others not because every night brought disaster, but because the body's weakness was real. When someone slept alone, that dependence was broken. The silence around them was not neutral. It meant there was no one to hear a change in breathing, no one to notice if the fire was dying, no one to wake first at an unfamiliar sound, and no one to share the strange work of deciding whether the night was safe. Loneliness therefore had weight. It could press on the senses, it could keep the ears searching, it could make the body hold itself closer to waking. The fear of sleeping alone was partly the fear of being reduced to one body when human survival had long depended on more than one body. This helps explain why the absence of others can feel larger at night than during the day. In daylight, a person alone can still act. They can walk, look, call, gather, climb, follow tracks, or return to the group. They can use distance and sight to regain control. At night, especially while lying down, control becomes smaller. The body cannot easily check every sound. The eyes cannot judge the edge of darkness. The mind may not know whether it should rest or stay alert. In this condition, another person nearby is not only company, they are a form of environmental support. Their breathing, warmth, and small movements tell the brain that the human world has not disappeared. Without those signs, the dark may feel too open. This does not mean ancient humans were weak because they feared being alone. It means they were adapted to a world where aloneness could become dangerous quickly. The feeling itself may have helped keep people near the group, close to fire, within hearing, and inside the first human shelters made of bodies and trust. In that sense, loneliness at night was once useful. It warned the body that it had drifted too far from the pattern that made sleep survivable. The ancient fear of sleeping alone was not simply fear of solitude. It was the memory of a time when solitude could become cold, unreadable, and real, long before the mind had words for why the empty space beside the body felt unsafe. A person alone at night does not only lose help after danger appears, they lose the calming effect that comes before danger is even known. This is easy to overlook. Much of human safety is not made in the moment of crisis. It is made earlier, through the steady signs that tell the body it can lower its guard. For ancient humans, those signs were often social. Familiar voices before sleep, bodies arranged close together, the smell of smoke, the heat of embers, the soft noise of children settling. the presence of elders within the warm center, and the small movements of people who belonged to the same group. These were not luxuries. They were conditions that could help the body trust the night. Alone, many of those conditions vanished. The darkness did not have to contain an actual threat for the body to feel less safe. The missing group itself became the problem. The brain could not hear the ordinary sounds of belonging, so it listened more closely to the uncertain sounds of the world. In the long beginning of human life, this difference may have shaped sleep in a practical way. A lonely sleeper might wake more often, stay lighter in sleep, or keep the body tense because no outside protection was near. Over one night, that might only feel uncomfortable. Across many nights it could become costly. Poor rest changes judgment. It makes movement clumsier. It weakens patience. It makes cold feel harsher and danger harder to read. Ancient people did not need modern sleep science to understand this. They would have known, through living, that a person who rested badly was less ready for the next day. The group helped prevent that cost by making sleep feel safer before anything happened. This is why loneliness at night was physical. It entered the breath, the muscles, the ears, and the depth of sleep. It was the body's way of measuring how much protection remained around it. In daylight, a lonely person could still look for others, follow tracks, call out, or move towards smoke. At night, once lying down, those choices narrowed. The body became still, the ground became larger, and the distance to other humans mattered more. Even a small separation could change the meaning of sound. A cough nearby is a human sign. A branch breaking far away is a question. Breathing beside you is a pattern. Silence beyond the fire is an opening. Ancient humans lived in a world where such differences mattered. The fear of sleeping alone may have grown from the body's ability to notice the difference between a human-filled darkness and an empty one. This also helps explain why the fear did not need to be dramatic. It may have been quiet, almost ordinary, a reluctance to lie too far from the others, a preference for sleeping where voices could still be heard, a need to stay within the fire's shared warmth, a feeling that the edge of the camp was less restful than the center. Such feelings could guide behavior without becoming spoken rules. They kept people near the arrangement that had protected children, adults, and elders for generations. In this sense, loneliness at night was not only pain, it was guidance. It told the body that the old system of shared survival had thinned. The person was still alive, still capable, still human, but the network around them had narrowed to almost nothing. That narrowing was what the body resisted. Modern life can make solitude feel peaceful because walls, lights, locks, and familiar rooms now carry some of the work once done by people. But the older body remembers a different kind of safety. It remembers that night was easier when the dark contained other human sounds. It remembers that sleep was deeper when weakness was shared. Ancient humans may have feared sleeping alone because loneliness was once more than a feeling. It was a real reduction in warmth, awareness, response, and trust, arriving at the very hour when the body needed those things most. The ancient loneliness of night was not only the absence of people, it was the collapse of a protective world down to one body. A human alone after sunset still had eyes, ears, hands, memory, and perhaps fire, but each of these became smaller when separated from others. The eyes could not see in all directions. The ears could not compare a sound with another listener. The hands could not hold a tool while fully asleep. Memory could not be checked against another person's memory. Fire could not be tended by someone else if the sleeper drifted too deeply. This is why loneliness could become physical. It changed what the body was able to do. It changed how much warmth surrounded the skin, how much attention surrounded the mind, and how much help could arrive before a small problem became larger. For ancient humans, being alone at night meant that every layer of protection had thinned at the same time. The darkness was still darkness, but now it had fewer human signs inside it. No breathing nearby, no familiar shifting, no child turning under a covering, no elder coughing close to the fire, no quiet movement of someone waking to feed the embers. The body might still be resting in the same landscape, beneath the same sky, on the same ground, but the human field around it had disappeared. That disappearance may have been enough to make sleep feel unsafe. In the long beginning of human life, emotions often carried survival information. Fear could keep a person away from a cliff edge, from strange movement in the brush, from spoiled food, from a risky crossing, or from a place where the group could not easily help. Loneliness may have carried information too. It may have told the body that the distance from others was becoming too great. At night, that message would be stronger because the body was approaching its weakest state. A lonely person in daylight could walk back, call out, search for smoke, follow tracks, or climb to look across the land. A lonely sleeper could do almost none of that. Once the body lay down, the cost of distance increased. The mind might keep listening because listening was the only remaining way to reduce uncertainty. This kind of alertness did not have to feel like terror. It could feel like rest that never fully arrives, like the body waiting for a sign that the night is held by more than itself. Near others, that sign could be simple. A breath, a movement, a small sound from the fire, a voice before sleep, a known body close enough to touch. These signs told the nervous system that it was still inside the human circle. Alone, the body had to create trust without them. Modern life can hide how old this problem is. A locked room can make solitude safe in a practical sense. Walls can replace some of what the group once did. Electric light can shrink darkness instantly. A phone can connect a person to distant help. But the older pattern remains understandable because the body was shaped long before these protections existed. For most of human history, safety was not stored in objects alone. It was stored in nearness. It was stored in being heard, warmed, noticed, and remembered by others. That is why ancient loneliness at night was not only sadness. It was a warning that the person had moved outside the arrangement where sleep made sense. The fear of sleeping alone grew from the body's recognition that humans were not built to become fully defenseless in isolation. We were built to let our guard down inside a shared world. When that shared world vanished, the body could still sleep, but it had to sleep with fewer layers between itself and the unknown. And in the ancient night, fewer layers could feel like danger before danger ever appeared. Ancient sleep was probably not always the long, sealed, private sleep that many modern people imagine. Today, sleep is often treated as something that happens in one room, on one bed, behind one door, under conditions made as stable as possible. The light is turned off, the walls remain still, the temperature is controlled, the sleeper expects to disappear into rest and return in the morning. But for much of human history, sleep likely belonged to a more open and changing world. It was closer to fire, weather, animals, other bodies, and the movements of the night itself. People may have slept in shorter stretches, woken to tend embers, shifted because of cold, listened to sounds, cared for children, or responded to others moving nearby. This does not mean ancient humans never slept deeply, or that they were awake in fear all night. That would be too simple. It means their sleep was probably woven into the environment rather than separated from it. The night was not shut outside. It remained close enough to be heard, smelled, felt, and answered. This matters because sleeping alone would have changed that whole pattern. A person alone had fewer reasons to trust waking and sleeping as a shared rhythm. Near others, waking in the night was not a failure of sleep. It could be part of how the group stayed connected to fire, warmth, children, weather, and sound. Someone might wake briefly, look toward the embers, hear breathing around them and settle again. Another might shift closer to warmth. A child might stir and be covered before fully waking. An elder might cough, and someone nearby might hear. These small interruptions did not necessarily destroy rest. They could help protect it, because the group allowed sleep to remain flexible without becoming unsafe, alone. The same interruptions could feel different. Waking in darkness with no human sound nearby could make the mind search harder. A small noise might not be balanced by another person's calm. A fading fire might require the lone sleeper to rise or risk losing warmth. A strange silence might remain unanswered. In this way, ancient sleep was not only a biological state, it was a social arrangement. The body slept, but the group helped decide how safe that sleep could be. This is also why modern ideas about perfect silence may not fit the older human night. For ancient humans, complete silence around a sleeper may not always have meant peace. It could mean distance from the group. It could mean no one close enough to breathe, move, cough, whisper, or wake. The sounds of other people were not distractions in the same way modern noise can be. They were signs of presence. They told the sleeping brain that the human circle still existed. The crackle of fire, the soft turning of bodies, the low voice of someone awake, and the breathing of children and adults could form a background that made rest possible. Ancient sleep may have been lighter in some moments and deeper in others, shaped by the needs of the group and the pressures of the landscape. A lone sleeper lost that shared background. The night became too dependent on one person's body. One person had to sleep, listen, stay warm, remember the land, and remain ready to wake. That is a heavy task for a brain that needs rest. The fear of sleeping alone at night therefore becomes clearer when we stop imagining sleep as a locked private state and see it as an older rhythm between body, camp, and darkness. Ancient humans did not simply close their eyes and leave the world. They slept inside a living web of fire, weather, sound, kinship, and shared attention. To sleep alone was to step out of that web and ask one vulnerable body to do what human sleep had long done together. Modern sleep often asks the body to trust separation. One person, one bed, one room, one closed door. Ancient sleep more often asked the body to trust nearness. The difference is not only cultural, it changes what the sleeping brain receives during the night. In a shared camp, waking briefly could bring confirmation. The fire was still there. The group was still there. The child was still nearby. The ground was still familiar. The sky, wind, and sound still belonged to the same place where the body had fallen asleep. A person could wake, listen for a moment, feel the pattern of others around them, and return to rest. Alone, waking had another meaning. The same darkness had to be checked by one person. The same sound had to be judged without comparison. The same cold had to be solved without shared warmth. This made ancient sleep less like a sealed escape from the world, and more like a repeated negotiation with it. The body entered sleep, returned for a moment, checked the edge of the night, and sank back again if enough signs of safety remained. In the long beginning of human life, the group helped provide those signs. This does not mean humans in the past slept badly all the time. It means their sleep was probably adapted to a world where rest and awareness were not enemies. They lived with fire, seasonal weather, children, insects, animal sounds, hunger, cold, and the movement of other people. Sleep had to bend around these realities. A person might sleep deeply when the camp felt settled, then wake lightly when the fire changed or when another body moved. Such waking could be brief and ordinary, not dramatic. It could be part of a healthy rhythm in an environment where the night itself remained active. But alone, these brief awakenings could become heavier. A sleeper who wakes with others nearby returns to a human pattern. A sleeper who wakes alone returns to absence. That absence can make the mind search for what is missing. The old question rises again, not in words, but in the body. Who else is holding the night? Ancient humans may have feared sleeping alone because solitary sleep demanded too much continuous trust from one nervous system. It asked the brain to go deep, while also knowing that no one else would notice what it missed. The sleep of a group allowed trust to be distributed. Some people slept, some stirred, some woke briefly, some tended the fire, some answered children, and some simply shifted in ways others could hear. Awareness moved softly through the camp without needing a fixed watch. The result was a kind of shared sleep, not because everyone dreamed the same dream, but because no one had to be fully alone with the dark. This shared rhythm may have been especially important during long nights, cold seasons, or unfamiliar travel. When the group slept in a new place, the landscape had not yet become fully known. The sound of the wind through different trees, the movement of water, the calls of animals, or the shape of the ground could all feel less certain. Shared sleep made this uncertainty easier to carry. Alone in a new place, the body had fewer anchors. It did not have familiar human sounds to balance unfamiliar environmental sounds. It did not have another person's calm to measure its fear against. It did not have the reassurance of many bodies choosing the same place to rest. The modern world often hides this because our sleeping spaces are designed to stay the same. Ancient sleeping spaces changed with movement, season, weather, and need. The one constant was often the group. To sleep alone was to lose the most reliable part of that changing world. It meant that ancient sleep, already open to fire, wind, sound, and waking, became unsupported. And an unsupported sleep, in a world without walls, could feel less like rest and more like a fragile pause inside the dark. Ancient sleep was not separate from ancient life. It was part of the same system that included fire, weather, movement, hunger, children, elders, tools, and the changing ground beneath the body. A person did not leave that system behind when they closed their eyes. They entered it in a different state. The ears stayed partly open. The skin felt cold, dampness, insects, and nearby warmth. The nose could still receive smoke, bodies, rain, plants, animals, or the smell of earth after dark. The brain moved into dreams, but it did not become blind to the world. This is why sleeping alone could feel so unnatural in the older human setting. Solitary sleep asked the body to perform two difficult tasks at the same time: to rest deeply enough to recover, and to remain alert enough to replace the missing group. Near others, these tasks could be divided. The sleeper could surrender more because the camp still held a wider awareness. Alone, surrender became more risky. The body had to keep a thin thread tied to the outside world, because no other body was close enough to hold that thread for it. This makes ancient sleep feel less like a private event and more like a shared rhythm. A camp did not need everyone awake to remain responsive. It only needed enough overlapping wakefulness, enough brief stirring, enough familiar sounds, enough warmth, and enough memory to keep the night from becoming completely unheld. Someone might wake for a child. Someone might wake from cold. Someone might wake when embers fell. Someone might shift closer to another body. Someone might listen for a moment, then sleep again. None of this had to be dramatic. It was the ordinary texture of rest in a world that stayed alive after sunset. To sleep alone was to remove that texture. The night became smoother in the wrong way, emptier, without the small human disturbances that told the brain it was not abandoned. Silence could become less like peace and more like a lack of confirmation. In that silence, the mind might return again and again to the edge of waking, looking for signs that were not there. This older form of sleep also helps explain why the fear of sleeping alone was not necessarily a fear of one clear threat. It could be fear of unsupported vulnerability. A person might not imagine a specific predator, stranger, storm, or accident. The body might simply know that if any of those things happened, the response would begin too late and with too few helpers. Ancient sleep was flexible because it had to fit a flexible world. People moved across landscapes. Camps changed with seasons. Weather changed. Food changed. The group's health changed. A sleeping arrangement that worked in one place might not work in another. The stable element was not always the shelter or the ground. Often, it was the people. Their nearness allowed the body to carry uncertainty without staying fully awake. This is the quiet point that brings the ancient night into focus. Humans may have feared sleeping alone because sleep itself was never meant to be completely isolated from human presence. It developed in a world where bodies rested beside bodies, where waking could pass from one person to another, where the fire belonged to more than one hand, and where the darkness was faced by a group even when most eyes were closed. Modern sleep can be private because modern structures carry many older protections for us. But before those structures, sleep was safer when it was shared. Alone, the sleeper remained human, but the sleep became thinner, more watchful, and more exposed. The ancient night did not demand constant fear, it demanded support. And the most reliable support was often another human close enough to breathe, stir, wake, and return the sleeping body to the circle of the living. Walls changed the ancient night slowly. They did not arrive all at once, and they did not immediately remove the older fear of sleeping alone. Long before houses became permanent, humans used many kinds of shelter: caves, rock overhangs, windbreaks, branches, hides, grasses, brush, snow in some regions, and the natural shape of the land itself. These shelters mattered. They blocked wind, held warmth, limited the direction from which something could approach, and gave people a more stable place to rest. But early shelter was not the same as modern safety. A cave mouth still opened into darkness. A hide shelter could still move in the wind. A wall of branches could slow cold air without stopping sound. A rock overhang could cover the head while leaving the front open to the night. The human body might be better protected, but the world was still close. This is why the fear of sleeping alone did not disappear just because humans learned to shape sleeping spaces. Shelter helped, but it did not replace the group. A person alone under cover was still alone with one pair of ears, one sleeping mind, one body that could cool, startle, wake slowly, or fail to understand a sound in time. As humans began to build more stable places to live, the meaning of night changed again. A hut, a tent, a cave, or a later house could create a stronger boundary between inside and outside. The sleeping body no longer had to lie fully open beneath the sky. Smoke, warmth, tools, food, children, and adults could gather in a more defined space. In some places, repeated camps became seasonal homes. In other places, villages eventually held many people in structures that stayed through time. These changes were important, but they were layered on top of older habits rather than replacing them completely. The first walls did not erase the ancient brain. They gave the brain new signals of safety. A roof above, a known entrance, a repeated hearth, a familiar sleeping place, a storage area, a doorway, a wall thick enough to stop wind. These things could help the body trust the night. Yet the old pattern remained underneath. Sleep felt safer when the protected space was shared. A wall could block wind, but it could not hear. A door could narrow the entrance, but it could not wake by itself. A roof could hold off rain, but it could not notice a child turning cold. This is why, even after shelter improved, human beings continued to sleep in shared spaces for much of history. Privacy, as many modern people understand it, is a late luxury. For a very long time, sleeping near family, kin, animals, fire, or household members was ordinary in many societies. This does not mean every ancient person feared solitude in the same way. Human cultures have always varied, but the larger pattern is clear enough. Shelter and social sleeping often worked together. The house did not begin by making everyone separate. It often made the group's nearness more enclosed. It gathered people inside a stronger version of the camp. The fire moved inward. The children stayed close. The old remained within reach. The night was pushed farther away, but it was not completely forgotten. A person sleeping alone inside a shelter may have been safer than a person sleeping alone in the open, but the body could still notice what was missing if the space felt too empty. No shared breathing, no movement from others, no one to confirm a sound, no one to wake first. In this way, built shelter changed the form of fear, not necessarily the root of it. The ancient fear began in exposure, but it also lived in separation. Walls reduced exposure. They did not automatically heal separation. The deeper story is that humans slowly moved protection from living bodies into built spaces. Fire, group attention, warmth, memory, and nearness were gradually joined by roofs, walls, entrances, and repeated places. But the oldest layer remained. Before a wall could become home, home had already been a circle of people. Before a door could make the body feel safe, another human presence had done that work for thousands upon thousands of nights. Ancient humans may have feared sleeping alone because shelter was never only a thing around the body. It was also a relationship around the body, and walls could strengthen that relationship only when they did not leave the sleeper completely alone. As shelters became more solid, humans gained a new kind of nighttime confidence. A repeated sleeping place could hold memory better than open ground. A hearth could return to the same position. Tools could be kept where hands expected them. Children could learn the inside of a dwelling by touch, smell, shadow, and sound. Smoke marks, worn floors, stored fuel, sleeping mats, hides, posts, stones, and entrances could make a place feel known across many nights. This was a major change in human life. The night no longer had to be rebuilt completely each evening. Some part of safety could stay in place. Yet this also created a new tension. The more shelter carried protection, the easier it became to imagine that a person could sleep apart from others. A wall could give the feeling that the outside world had been pushed away. A doorway could make danger seem narrowed. A roof could make weather less immediate, but the sleeping body still remained ancient in its weakness. It still woke slowly. It still listened for unfamiliar sounds. It still needed warmth, trust, and enough evidence that the world had not shifted while the eyes were closed. A house could reduce many old dangers, but it could not change the basic nature of sleep. This is why the fear of sleeping alone may have survived even as humans became better builders. The structure around the sleeper changed faster than the nervous system inside the sleeper. The body could lie under a roof, but some older part of the brain still asked the same questions that mattered beside a fire. Who else is near? Who would hear? Who would wake? Who would know if something is wrong? Early houses and shelters also did not always create privacy. In many traditional and historical settings, people often slept close to family or household members, sometimes in one shared room, sometimes near animals, stored food, tools, or fire. This was practical. It preserved warmth. It saved space. It allowed care for children and elders. It kept valuable things near the people who needed them. It also continued the older pattern of shared night awareness. The built dwelling did not immediately turn humans into isolated sleepers. It often enclosed the group more tightly. In that sense, the house was not the opposite of the camp. It was the camp made more durable. The fire might be placed inside or near an entrance. The sleeping bodies might be arranged along walls, around a hearth, or in familiar positions. The same social logic remained. Safety was strongest when shelter and nearness worked together. A person sleeping alone inside such a place might be protected from wind and rain, but the emotional and sensory field would be thinner. A sound at the wall, a noise near the entrance, or a change in the fire would still have to be interpreted alone. No one else would shift, whisper, cough, or rise first. No one else's calm would tell the body that nothing was wrong. The room might be enclosed, but the mind could still feel unsupported. This shows how human fear can remain after practical danger has changed. Fear does not always measure danger exactly. It often measures the absence of old protections. A modern room can be far safer than an ancient camp, yet a person may still feel unease if the room is too silent, too empty, or too separated from others. In the past, as humans moved from temporary shelters toward more lasting homes, this unease may have changed its shape rather than disappearing. The danger outside became less immediate in some places, but the question of isolation remained. Was the sleeper inside a human world, or merely inside a structure? Was the night being shared, or only blocked? The ancient body likely trusted walls best when walls contained people. It trusted shelter best when shelter held breath, warmth, movement, and memory. This is the slow history behind the fear of sleeping alone. Humans did not simply replace one kind of safety with another. They layered new protections over old ones. The wall joined the fire, the roof joined the group, the doorway joined the listening ear. But when a person slept alone, some layers still fell away. The shelter remained, but the shared night was missing. And for a species whose first homes were made of other humans, that absence could still feel like an opening in the dark. The building of walls did not end the old night at once. It changed the distance between the sleeper and the dark, but it did not remove the body's memory of needing others. A shelter could hold warmth longer than open ground. A doorway could narrow the unknown. A roof could make rain less threatening. A wall could stop wind and hide the sleeper from view. These were real advances, and they mattered deeply. Yet the first human sense of safety had already been trained by something older than construction. It had been trained by nearness. Before people trusted walls, they trusted breathing bodies, shared fire, familiar voices, repeated sleeping positions, and the knowledge that someone else might wake before them. When built spaces became stronger, those older signals did not vanish. They moved inside. The dwelling became safest when it held the same human pattern that the camp once held. Children within reach, elders near warmth, tools nearby, fire watched, and sleepers close enough for small sounds to matter. This is why sleeping alone could still feel incomplete. The shelter might surround the body, but if no other human presence filled it, the old system was only partly there. A person alone inside a hut, cave, or later house might be safer from weather, yet still separated from shared judgment. If a sound came near the entrance, only one mind interpreted it. If embers faded, only one body had to wake. If sickness, fear, cold, or injury came during the night, no one else noticed quickly. Walls reduced exposure, but they did not create companionship. They could make darkness less physical, but not always less lonely. Over time, human beings slowly learned to place more trust in objects and structures. A strong wall could do some work once done by the group. A door could replace part of the need for someone watching the opening. A raised floor, a roof, stored fuel, and a familiar hearth could reduce the risks of sleeping. Later, villages and towns added another layer. Neighbours, paths, boundaries, customs, and the sense that many people were nearby, even if not in the same room. But each new layer rested on an older foundation. Human safety had first been social, then spatial. The place became safe because people had made it human. This helps explain why the fear of sleeping alone did not disappear in a straight line as shelters improved. It had no single cause that one invention could remove. It came from darkness, sleep vulnerability, cold, uncertainty, children, memory, and the absence of shared senses. A wall could answer some of these. It could not answer all. Even now, a room can be locked and still feel strange if it is too silent. A house can be strong and still feel empty. This modern feeling is not proof of a direct ancient memory, but it shows how the body can distinguish between being enclosed and being accompanied. Ancient humans likely lived with that distinction much more strongly. To be enclosed was useful. To be accompanied was deeper. The first kept some danger out. The second helped the body let go. In the long history of human shelter, the group did not disappear behind walls. It became the reason walls felt like home. The oldest home was not built from wood, stone, or earth alone. It was built from the presence of people who could hear one another in the dark. As humans began building stronger places to sleep, the night became easier to manage, but the ancient fear remained understandable. Sleeping alone still meant losing the shared breathing, shared waking, shared warmth, and shared meaning that had made rest possible before architecture. The wall could stand through the night, but only another human could make the sleeping body feel that the night was being held with it. An empty room can be safe and still feel wrong. That is the quiet puzzle left behind by the long history of human sleep. A modern person may lie behind walls under a roof with a locked door, a phone nearby, an electric light only one reach away. By every practical measure, the room may be far safer than an ancient camp under open sky. Yet the body can still listen. It can still notice a sound in the hallway, a shift in the wood, a distant vehicle, a sudden silence after the house settles. The mind may know there is no serious danger, but the body may not fully relax. This does not mean the body is foolish. It means the body is old. It was shaped through a much longer world than the one we sleep in now. For most of human history, safety at night did not mean being alone in a sealed space. It meant being near enough to others that the night was shared. When a modern room is empty, some ancient signals are missing. There is no breathing nearby, no one turning in sleep, no quiet movement that says another person is present, no shared warmth, no second mind to wake first. The room may protect the body from outside danger, but it does not always give the nervous system the social signs it once used to measure safety. This is why a house can feel secure in the daytime and strangely thin at night. Daylight gives the eyes authority. It lets the mind confirm the room, the door, the window, the familiar objects. Night takes away part of that authority. Shadows soften edges. Small sounds become more noticeable. The body becomes horizontal, still, and slower. The sleeping mind approaches its most vulnerable state. At that moment, the older question returns quietly. Am I alone with the dark, or is the dark being held with me? Ancient humans answered that question through nearness. Modern humans often answer it through architecture. But architecture does not always speak the language the body first learned. A lock does not breathe. A wall does not stir. A lamp does not judge whether a sound is ordinary. These objects are useful, often very useful, but they are not the same as another living presence. The uneasy feeling in an empty room may come from the mismatch between modern safety and ancient expectation. The mind understands the room as safe. The body searches for the group. This does not make every person afraid of sleeping alone, and it does not mean solitude is unhealthy or unnatural in every setting. People vary, and many modern people sleep alone peacefully, but the unease is understandable when seen through deep time. The human body did not evolve in private bedrooms. It evolved through camps, shelters, fires, families, children, elders, and shared night sounds. It learned that sleep becomes safer when vulnerability is noticed by others. In an empty room, that old pattern is partly absent. The fear may not appear as a clear thought. It may appear as checking a door twice, wanting a small light, keeping sound in the background, sleeping better when someone else is home, or feeling comfort from a pet nearby. These modern habits are not exact copies of ancient life, but they point toward the same basic need. The body wants evidence that it is not alone while it becomes defenseless. Ancient humans feared sleeping alone at night because aloneness removed real layers of protection. Modern humans may still feel a faint echo of that loss, even when the real danger has been greatly reduced. The empty room feels wrong because it is safe in a new way, while the body still remembers an older kind of safety. The strange feeling of an empty room often begins when the room becomes too still. During the day, stillness can feel clean and peaceful. At night, stillness can begin to feel like missing information. The body expects a world to make certain sounds. In the ancient camp, there were always small signs of life: breathing, shifting, embers settling, a child turning, wind moving through shelter, someone waking briefly and lying down again. These sounds did not always disturb sleep. They could support it because they told the nervous system that the human circle was still present. A modern empty room may be safer in many practical ways, but it can also be strangely silent in a way that the older body does not easily understand. The mind may know that silence means privacy. The body may hear it as absence. This is why a small sound in an empty room can feel larger than the same sound in a house where others are sleeping. When people are nearby, the sound belongs to a shared world. Alone, the sound belongs only to you. There is no one else to wake, no one else to ignore it, no one else whose calm tells the body that nothing has changed. This difference brings the ancient question into a modern space. Is the night being interpreted by one body or by more than one? In deep human history, that question had real force. A person who woke alone had to judge the dark without comparison. A person who woke near others could read their reactions before deciding what to feel. The modern room changes the setting, but not the basic structure of the nervous system. The body still uses social information to regulate fear. Another person sleeping nearby can make a room feel held, even if they do nothing. Their presence is a signal that the space is shared, that the silence is not abandonment, and that waking would not happen alone. Even a familiar animal can sometimes give a faint version of this signal, because another living body changes the meaning of stillness. The ancient roots of this are not mysterious. Humans survived in groups where awareness, warmth, and response were distributed. A lone body at night had to carry more uncertainty. That old equation can still echo inside modern safety. This does not mean every uneasy feeling in an empty room is ancient fear. Modern stress, memory, grief, habit, noise, light, and personal experience all shape how people sleep. But the deeper history makes the feeling understandable. The body may be reacting not to a present threat, but to the loss of a very old pattern. The room is enclosed, yet not socially filled. The door is locked, yet no other breathing confirms safety. The light can be turned on, yet no one else shares the interpretation of the dark. Ancient humans feared sleeping alone because being alone removed the group from the sleeping mind. Modern people may feel a softened version of that removal when a quiet room feels too empty. The unease is not proof that danger is near. It is a reminder that human rest was once built from more than walls. It was built from nearness, from signs of life around the sleeper, and from the knowledge that the body did not have to wake alone if the night changed. In that sense, the empty room feels wrong, because it asks an ancient body to trust a new kind of silence. A modern empty room can feel wrong, because it gives the body safety without companionship. It gives walls, distance, quiet, and privacy, but not the old signs that once told a sleeper the night was shared. This is why the feeling can be so difficult to explain. A person may know the door is locked. They may know the window is closed. They may know the room is familiar, yet the body still listens as if something is unfinished. The unease does not always come from believing danger is present. It can come from the absence of confirmation that danger is being watched by anyone else. In the ancient world, the sleeping body learned to trust more than objects. It trusted other breathing bodies. It trusted the small sounds of a group settling into the dark. It trusted the knowledge that if something changed, fear would not remain trapped inside one mind. In a quiet, modern room, that old social confirmation may be missing. The room protects, but it does not answer. The silence stays silent. The walls stand still. The body has to interpret the night alone. This is one reason people may seek substitutes for presence without thinking of them as ancient. A dim light, a familiar sound, a radio left low, a fan, a pet nearby, a phone within reach, or the knowledge that someone else is in the house can make the night feel less empty. These things do not recreate an ancient camp, but they soften the same problem. They give the brain a pattern to rest inside. They make the room feel inhabited, predictable, and less sealed around a single nervous system. For ancient humans, that pattern came more directly from people. The group was the background sound. The group was the warmth. The group was the first alarm, the first reassurance, the first proof that the sleeper had not been left alone at the edge of the dark. Modern life has moved many of those protections into technology and architecture, but the body may still respond most easily to living presence. That is why sleeping alone can be peaceful for some people and uneasy for others. The present room matters, but so does the older body inside it. The long human story helps us see this unease without shame. It is not a failure of courage to feel alert in an empty room. It may be an old survival pattern appearing in a world that has changed faster than the nervous system. Ancient humans feared sleeping alone because aloneness once meant fewer ears, less warmth, no shared memory, no quick help, and no one close enough to wake with them. Today, those dangers are often reduced, but the shape of the feeling can remain. The body still knows that sleep is surrender. It still knows that night removes some control. It still asks, in its quiet way, whether the surrender is being held by more than one life. When the room is empty, the answer may feel incomplete. This does not mean we must live as ancient humans lived. It means the modern bedroom carries a deeper history than it seems. Every locked door, every lamp, every blanket, every soft bed is part of a long attempt to make sleep safe without always needing the group as close as before. Yet beneath those comforts, the older pattern is still understandable. The first safe night was not silent and separate. It was shared. It had breath, fire, warmth, movement, and other bodies close enough to notice. So when an empty room feels strange, it may be because the body is comparing two kinds of safety. The new safety of walls and the ancient safety of being near others. One is practical, the other is deeply social, and somewhere between them, the modern sleeper still carries the question that began beside ancient fires: who is holding the night with me? As we reach the end of this long journey through the ancient night, the question begins to look different from the way it first appeared. At the beginning, it might have seemed that ancient humans feared sleeping alone because darkness was dangerous. And darkness was dangerous, at least sometimes. There were animals, weather, unfamiliar ground, cold, injury, and uncertainty. But after following the trail through camps, fires, children, elders, shelters, memory, and sleep itself, a deeper answer begins to emerge. Ancient humans feared sleeping alone not simply because the world outside was threatening. They feared it because human life had been built around togetherness for so long that separation itself became a kind of vulnerability. The fear did not belong only to the eyes looking into darkness. It belonged to the entire human way of surviving. For hundreds of thousands of years, people did not face the night as isolated individuals. They faced it as groups. They gathered around warmth. They shared awareness. They carried knowledge through generations. They protected children who could not protect themselves. They cared for elders whose experience remained valuable. They slept near others because sleep required trust, and trust was easier when weakness was shared. Every evening the human body entered a state where it could not fully defend itself. Yet every evening people still slept. They slept because they had created systems that allowed vulnerability to become survivable. Fire was one system. Shelter was another. Shared memory was another. The group itself was perhaps the most important of all. The group allowed the body to surrender a little. It allowed the sleeper to believe that not every danger had to be noticed by one pair of ears. Not every sound had to be interpreted by one mind. Not every fear had to remain trapped inside one chest. This changes how we understand the ancient fear. It was not merely fear of predators. It was not merely fear of darkness. It was fear of being left alone with responsibilities that human beings had evolved to carry together. A lone sleeper had fewer layers between themselves and uncertainty. They had fewer sources of warmth, fewer sources of attention, fewer sources of response. The body understood this long before it could explain it. That understanding may have shaped emotions, habits, sleeping arrangements, and the very feeling of what safety meant. Safety was not only the absence of danger, it was the presence of others. This idea may seem surprisingly modern, yet it reaches deep into the human past. Even as shelters improved, villages appeared, and walls grew stronger, the social side of safety remained. People continued to build their nights around family, kinship, households, and shared spaces. The ancient pattern changed form, but it did not disappear, and perhaps that is why traces of it can still be felt now. The modern bedroom is different from the ancient camp in almost every practical way, yet the body that sleeps there is descended from countless sleepers who rested beside fires, under shelters, within circles of breathing people. The body carries a long memory of shared nights, even if that memory is not conscious. When an empty room feels strangely large, when a distant sound seems important, when another living presence brings comfort without speaking a word, those experiences become easier to understand through the lens of human history. They do not prove that we are ancient people trapped in a modern world. They simply remind us that evolution moves slowly, while environments can change quickly. The body often keeps older expectations inside newer conditions. And so the ancient fear of sleeping alone at night may never have been only about survival. It may also have been about belonging. In the deepest sense, humans survived not because they were the strongest animals, the fastest animals, or the best armed animals. They survived because they learned to carry weakness together. Every night was a quiet expression of that lesson. When darkness arrived, people gathered close, shared warmth, shared awareness, and shared the burden of uncertainty. Perhaps that was the first true shelter our species ever built. Not a wall, not a roof, not a fire, but the simple decision to face the night together. There is a quiet lesson hidden inside the ancient fear of sleeping alone. It tells us that human beings were never meant to understand safety only as separation from danger. Safety also meant connection. It meant being close enough to be heard, close enough to be warmed, close enough to be noticed when the body could no longer protect itself. This is a useful way to think about the human past, because it keeps us from imagining ancient people as either helpless victims of darkness or fearless survivors who never felt uncertainty. They were neither. They were human beings, carrying bodies much like ours, with eyes that weakened at night, brains that needed sleep, children who needed care, elders who carried memory, and groups that turned weakness into something more survivable. Their fear of sleeping alone was not a failure, it was information. It pointed them back toward the camp, the fire, the shelter, and the people who made rest possible. In that sense, fear had a social purpose. It helped keep the body near the pattern that protected it. It reminded the sleeper that one person could be strong during the day and still need others at night. That is not a small idea. It reaches into the center of human evolution. Our species became powerful not by escaping vulnerability, but by organizing around it. We made tools because our hands alone were not enough. We made fire because our bodies needed warmth and cooked food. We made shelters because skin and bone were not enough against weather. We made language, memory, kinship, and cooperation because one mind could not hold every danger, every season, every path, and every need. Sleep reveals this more clearly than almost anything else. When the body sleeps, pride disappears. The strongest person becomes slow to wake. The cleverest person cannot think clearly while deeply asleep. The most experienced person still needs warmth, time, and some trust in the world around them. Ancient humans understood this through nightly life. They did not need to turn it into a theory. They lived it by lying close, keeping fires alive, listening together, and letting the group carry what the individual could not. For a modern listener, this can become more than a historical explanation. It can become a gentler way to understand the body. If darkness sometimes makes the mind listen too much, if solitude at night sometimes feels heavier than it should, if the presence of another person or even another living creature brings comfort, these feelings do not have to be treated as strange. They belong to a long human story. They may not always match the real danger of the present room, but they make sense inside the deeper history of the species. The body is not only reacting to now, it is carrying patterns shaped by many older nights. This does not mean we must fear being alone. It means we can see the feeling with more patience. The ancient fear of sleeping alone teaches that comfort is not weakness, and needing signs of safety is not childish. Sleep is one of the most trusting acts the body performs. Every night, the body becomes still and gives itself to the dark for a while. In the ancient world, that trust was easier when shared. Today we have walls, lights, doors, beds, and many protections our ancestors did not have. But the oldest protection may still be the most human one, the knowledge that life was never carried alone for very long. Ancient humans feared sleeping alone at night because sleep exposed the truth of our species. We survive best not when we deny vulnerability, but when we build circles strong enough to hold it. So the ancient fear of sleeping alone at night was never only a fear of darkness. Darkness was the setting, but not the whole story. The deeper story was the sleeping body itself, soft, slow, trusting, and unable to hold the entire world at once. It needed warmth, it needed signs, it needed a known place, it needed the memory of where it was, and, for most of human history, it needed other humans close enough to make weakness less dangerous. The night reminded ancient people of a truth that daylight could sometimes hide. A person could walk alone for a while, gather alone for a while, think alone for a while, and still feel capable. But sleep stripped away that confidence. It returned everyone, even the strong, to a state of dependence. The hunter, the gatherer, the parent, the elder, the toolmaker, the child, all became quiet bodies in the dark. What made that acceptable was not courage alone. It was the circle around them. Fire helped, shelter helped, knowledge helped, but the circle of people gave those protections life. Someone could wake, someone could listen, someone could remember, someone could calm a fear before it became panic. Someone could notice cold, sickness, crying, silence, or change. In that shared night, the human body could let go without being abandoned. That may be the most important message left by this old fear. Humans did not become human by becoming invulnerable. They became human by building ways to carry vulnerability together. The fear of sleeping alone was not something primitive to laugh at. It was a signal from a world where survival depended on nearness, care, and shared attention. It told the body to return to the fire, to the voices, to the breathing of others, to the place where danger did not have to be interpreted alone. Modern life has changed the shape of night. We have walls, locks, lights, beds, alarms, phones, and rooms that can be safer than any ancient camp. Many people sleep alone peacefully, and for good reason, but the body is not made only from the present. It is also shaped by older patterns, repeated across countless nights before houses, before villages, before privacy became normal. That is why an empty room can sometimes feel larger than it is. That is why a small sound can matter more in darkness. That is why the presence of another living being can soften the night without saying a word. These feelings do not mean danger is truly near. They may simply remind us that the first human safety was social before it was architectural. Before a door could protect us, another person did. Before a room could hold sleep, a group did. Before silence became peaceful, the sounds of breathing, fire, and nearby bodies told the nervous system that it was safe enough to rest. And perhaps that is the quiet value of looking backward. It helps us treat the body with less shame. If the night sometimes makes us alert, if solitude sometimes feels strange, if comfort comes from knowing someone else is near, that does not make us weak. It makes us descendants of people who survived by noticing what kept them alive. The ancient human did not fear sleeping alone because they lacked bravery. They feared it because their body understood a careful truth. Sleep is safer when trust has somewhere to rest. And even now, beneath the roof, behind the door, in the stillness of a modern room, some older part of us may still be listening for the same answer our ancestors needed beside the fire. When the eyes close, who holds the night with us?